Good evening and welcome to the January 18, 2022 regular meeting of the Mayor and City Council. First item on our agenda is Pledge of Allegiance. I'd like to ask Councilmember McNulty to lead us in the pledge tonight.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Jim. Next item on our agenda is reflection. And I wanted to call everyone's attention to a tragic bit of news that we all received around 9 or 10 days ago, the passing of Becky Pritchard, who many in the community know from Pritchard Music Academy, who was an absolute stalwart member of our community, a longtime member of the Cultural Arts Advisory Committee here for the city, a fixture at all of our major events, be it Oktoberfest or Jingle Jubilee or the Book Festival, wherever there was music going on. Becky was there and she was coaching her students from Pritchard Music Academy, her combos, her ensembles, and she'd be there with an irrepressible smile and pride in the work of her students. She was somebody special in all of our lives up here. And as we go into a moment of silence, I just want to express our deep, fond condolences to her husband, Joe, and her family and friends. We're just really, really devastated by this loss. So let's have a moment of silence, please. Thank you all very much. Next on our agenda is the approval of minutes. Tonight we have two sets of minutes to approve. The first one is from back in 2021, June 7th, which was a regular session. What is the pleasure of the council? Ryan Spiegel.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move approval of those minutes.
Okay, Neil Harris.
I will second that motion.
Okay, I will call the roll. All in favor say aye, any opposed say nay. Councilmember Harris.
Aye.
Councilmember McNulty.
Abstain.
Councilmember Spiegel.
Aye.
Councilmember Henderson.
Abstain.
And Councilmember Wu.
Aye.
Okay, it carries 3-0 with 2 abstentions. Council members McNulty and Henderson. Next, we have the minutes from the regular session on Monday, November 22nd, 2021. What is the pleasure of the council? And I believe everyone except for Ryan was present at this meeting. So Neil, go right ahead.
I move approval of the minutes of the regular session held November 22nd, 2021.
Okay, do we have a second? Rob Wu.
Second.
Okay, I will call the roll. Councilmember Harris.
Aye.
Councilmember McNulty.
Aye.
Councilmember Spiegel.
Abstain.
Councilmember Henderson.
Aye.
And Councilmember Wu.
Aye.
Okay, that carries 4-0 with 1 abstention. Councilmember Spiegel. Thank you all very much. Next, we're going to move on to appointments. Tonight we have several appointments and reappointments to various committees. What is the pleasure of the council? Ryan Spiegel.
Mr. Mayor, I move the resolution confirming the following appointments by you to the Community Advisory Committee for a 2-year term. Stephen Escobar, term to expire January 2024. To the Economic and Business Development Committee for a 3-year term. Jamil Hernandez, term to expire January 2025. To the Environmental Affairs Committee for a 2-year term. Adam Young, term to expire January 2024. To the Transportation Committee for a 2-year term. David Belgard and Matthew Amon, both terms to expire January 2024. Reappointments as follows: to the Economic and Business Development Committee for a 3-year term, Nadia Khan and Scott Friedman, terms to expire January 2025. To the Educational Enrichment Committee for 2-year terms, Beth Kennington and Stacy Simon, terms to expire January in 2024. To the Gaithersburg Parks, Arts and Recreation Corporation, Bridget Ryder, term to expire January 2025, a 3-year term. To the Senior Advisory Committee, Mary Hoffereck and Yvette Monroe, to 2-year terms to expire in January of 2024.
Thank you very much. Neil, I saw your hand up. Do you want to second it?
I do. I second the motion.
Okay, well then I will call the roll. Councilmember Harris,
Aye.
Councilmember McNulty,
Aye.
Councilmember Spiegel,
Aye.
Councilmember Henderson,
aye,
and Councilmember Wu.
Aye.
All right, carries unanimously, and we will thank them as we see them. As we often say, the serving on a city committee is a terrific way to get involved and contribute meaningfully to the work of the city of Gaithersburg, to really start get a handle of how things work and make a dent, make a mark. So we recommend it to anybody who's got interest in a little bit of time to give to the city. Now we have one more appointment to the Board of Supervisors of Elections, and we'll need to do a motion to confirm, and then we'll have to do an oath of office. What is the pleasure of the council? Jim McNulty.
Mr. Mayor, I move the resolution confirming the appointment made by you to the Board of Supervisors of Elections for Diego Figueroa for a term expiring in June of 2024.
And this is because he's filling in for an unexpired term of Joyce Aubrey, who had to retire from the committee early. So do we have a second? Lisa Henderson.
I second,
Okay, I will call the roll. Councilmember Harris,
Aye.
Councilmember McNulty,
Aye.
Councilmember Spiegel,
Aye.
Councilmember Henderson,
aye,
and Councilmember Wu.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. And now tech team, if you could bring Diego Figueroa up onto the Zoom with us so we can do the oath of office. Diego, welcome.
Hi, good evening, Mayor Ashman.
Thank you so much for agreeing to serve on this committee. You've just been confirmed, so congratulations. The last thing we need to do here is to have you recite the oath of office. So if I can ask you to raise your right hand, please, and repeat after me, and you're gonna have to forgive me because this is kind of an awkward oath. It's by law, this is the oath it's gotta be. So I, and then state your name,
I, Diego Figueroa,
do affirm that I will support
that I will support
the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the United States,
and that I will
and that I will
be faithful and bear true allegiance
be faithful and a true allegiance
to the state of Maryland,
to the state of Maryland,
and support the Constitution
and support the Constitution
and laws thereof,
and laws thereof,
and that I will,
and that I will,
to the best of my skill and judgment,
to the best of my skill and judgment,
diligently and faithfully,
diligently and faithfully,
without partiality or prejudice,
without partiality or prejudice,
execute the office of Board of Supervisors of Elections
of Board of Supervisory Elections
as a member according to the United States
according to the United States
and Maryland constitutions,
and Maryland constitutions,
the laws of this state,
the laws of the state,
and the Gaithersburg City Charter and Code.
and the Gaithersburg City and Charter Code.
Well done. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mayor Ashman.
We appreciate your service, and we're going to be having a joint meeting with the Board of Supervisors of Elections next month, and look forward to your participation.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right. Next tech team. Next, we're going to move on to our next agenda item, which is public comments. And this is the time the mayor and council would like to hear from anybody who'd like to speak on any topic that's not a public hearing topic. So tonight we do have two public hearings, or there's 2.5, I guess, because one of them's a joint consolidated public hearing. So if you're here to speak about the infill pad sites at this in Kentlands, or if you're here to talk about the potential project, the concept site plan across from Spectrum on 355, hold off. We're going to get to you those public hearings next. But if you'd like to speak on any other topic, then tech team, if you could play the instructional video of how to get our attention, that would be great.
Good evening. If you've connected to the meeting tonight via Zoom and you're on a desktop or a laptop and you wish to make a public comment, we can't currently see or hear you. What you need to do, please, is wiggle your mouse around and look towards the bottom center of your screen. You should see a raise hand button. Go ahead and click on that now for us, please. Alternatively, if you've connected in via telephone, you can press *9.
Thank you, tech team. Looks like we have a few speakers so far. So tech team, when you're ready, if you could bring up Amanda Shepard, please. And Amanda, when you unmute yourself, just state your name and address or neighborhood and begin your comments. And before you start, Amanda, let me just reiterate, or I'll iterate for the first time in this meeting, that we ask that you keep your comments no more than 3 minutes. If you have more than 3 minutes worth of material to deliver, feel free to deliver orally what you can in 3 minutes and give us the rest in writing. Send it to cityhall@gaithersburgmd.gov, and we'll consider any testimony written just the same as we would oral testimony. With that, Amanda, go right ahead.
Hi, like a bad penny, Amanda Shepard, 310 Hidden Forest Court. So first world problems. The city came and messed up our street and now they won't fix it. You're familiar because I've been to a few of these meetings. Anthony came and he talked to a bunch of us in the community, and he said he can't take aesthetics into consideration. So I guess I'm here to ask who can take it into consideration, and how do we get our street repaved once it gets warm? That's it.
Thank you, Amanda. Tech team, if you could bring up, please, Dave Belgard. And Dave, you know the deal as well. State your name, address, or neighborhood. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Dave Belgard, Washingtonian Woods. I unfortunately missed the January 3rd regular session, during which a very important vote was made. And because I didn't have an opportunity to speak then, I do want to voice my appreciation that the council took the action it did for the emergency ordinance to amend Chapter 13 of the City Code. I know that there's a lot of good points really on both sides, and really our building owners are very, very important, and ensuring that they're taken care of is equally important. But in these unique circumstances with the pandemic, I'm gratified that our representatives, our council, took the steps to address this short-term issue with the emergency procedure. So I just wanted to say thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave. Next, tech team, if you could bring up Daphne Tang. Daphne, when you unmute yourself, just state your name and address or neighborhood and go right ahead.
Okay, hi. My name is Daphne Tan. My address is 309 Hidden Forest Court in Gettysburg, Maryland. Okay, here's my statement. City of Gettysburg did a crack ceiling in the Hidden Creek development on November 3rd, 2021, last year. This preventive maintenance would extend the life of the street pavement. However, I consider this crack ceiling is a temporary fix. because the irregular black lines on the gray surface look ugly. If a medium beautification is part of Gettysburg Street services, I would like to request the city make the Hidden Creek Development Street visually acceptable, if not beautiful. On Gettysburg Surface Improvement Program webpage, Hidden Creek Development has a mix of PCI ratings. Hidden Forest Drive is rated fair, that's yellow code, and Hidden Forest Court is rated satisfactory, that's light blue. This is a May 2019 assessment. And Hidden Forest Drive is qualified for a pavement rehabilitation. Since these two streets are in the same development, I would like to request the city to do a restoration treatment or a structural overlays on these two streets. Oh, well, thank you.
Daphne, thank you very much. I'm not sure where Hidden Forest sits in terms of our schedule for resurfacing the streets, but if you want to send me a note, or Tanisha or any one of us a note, we'll be happy to follow up with staff and see where that stands, and get you in touch with staff to talk about that. Next, tech team, if you could bring up Robert Fisher, please. Robert, just unmute yourself, state your name, address, or neighborhood, go right ahead. Robert, I'm still seeing that you're muted. There you go, try now. Robert, are you there? Going once, going twice. All right, we'll just we'll move on. Okay, well, that's the last hand raised I see for now. So then let us go into our first. Oh wait, I see one more. Tech team, if you could bring up Anthony Brown, please. Anthony, just unmute yourself, state your name, address, or neighborhood, go right ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council members. My name is Anthony Brown. My address is 10 Hidden Forest Drive, Gaithersburg, Maryland. The community I am speaking on is the Hidden Creek community, which is right off of Mid-County Highway before you get to Goshen Road, just to give you an idea as to where it is. I've lived in this community since 2004. And in that time, you know, we pay taxes to the city, the county, and whoever else needs to pay them. And when we met with the city a little over a week ago, we were asking them about the beautification of the streets here, because right now they look horrible from an aesthetics point of view, and I think from a structural point of view, because there are hundreds of cracks in these streets. And we are not on any schedule that they were able to state that we're on with regards to improving this. What I am asking is that we get on a schedule to fix these streets, because it just doesn't look right for the houses in this community with the price that they are rated at, and to have a street that looks like a lower income neighborhood. The city tells us that they manage projects based upon needs and things of that nature. However, since 2004, I have seen no major projects within this community, and we've almost become the forgotten community. So I ask that the city consider the Hidden Creek community in the next round of decision making to fix the streets here and make this a beautiful community like the rest of Gaithersburg. Thank you. Those are all of my comments.
Thank you, Anthony. Do we have any other speakers before we move on? Going once, going twice. Okay. Just a quick note. I didn't make the connection that Daphne and Amanda and Anthony are all talking about the same area. And that just occurred to me. So sorry. Now I'm finally with the program here. I understand that Tony Berger from our public works staff has gone out there and talked to the residents there. You know, I'm going to address this very quickly here, and then I'm happy to meet all of you for coffee at some point and talk in greater detail. But this comes down to money and budget and how we spend everyone's tax money here. The fact is, resurfacing streets is very expensive. And we found that through our very high-tech assessments, where we actually have sort of a laser scanner that goes over all of our city streets and rates them on a very scientific scale, and gives us an ability to assess ratings, as you guys referenced during your testimonies, and the whatever the word is, the sealing of the cracks that we're doing, the spot sealing, for lack of a better word, because I don't have Tony here to remind me what the technical term is for this, is built to extend the life of streets and therefore save the city money that we can be using to more efficiently to serve you, while keeping the streets to an adequate condition until we get to the point where they're on the schedule to resurface. I don't have records, in front of me about how long it's been since streets have been surfaced in Hidden Creek. I can assure you the community is not forgotten. We all spend time there. We all think of it very fondly and are happy to represent the residents there, just as the residents elsewhere in the city. But I just wanted to make that quick note. Really, if the money was, if we had unlimited resources, we can just resurface streets all the time, but we really can't. And what we try to do is strike the right balance and get the most out of our assets and extend their life as much as we can. Rob Wu, do I see you raising your hand?
Yeah, Mayor, just a quick question is, we haven't really received an update on the program. We usually get an annual update since we adopted it. And I know probably Lisa and Jim probably saw it from the audience, but haven't been subject of it. Would it be possible to schedule, in the next few sessions, maybe an update on the program and perhaps a specific update on this neighborhood? Because I know it's been brought up a few times and I'm kind of curious about it as well, but more curious, or as curious, about just kind of the state of the program itself.
Tanisha, can I?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to do that, Mayor Ashman. And you were almost there on the term. It's crack sealing. And the PCR rating, the pavement condition rating is the technology that we use to determine the status of streets. I think not only does it help us stretch the dollars, but if you think about it in terms of resurfacing the streets that are in the worst shape first, if we skip over streets that have a worse rating for streets that have a better rating, the streets that are in worse condition continue to deteriorate, which actually costs more to repair in the long run. So this, we do our best to have an objective scientific approach, as you described, and we're happy to provide an update to the mayor and council on the program in the future.
Thank you very much, Tanisha. And with that, let's go into our first joint public hearing. Tech team, if you could bring up everybody that's part of this joint public hearing, then that would be great. And leading the presentation will be Jasmine Forbes from our planning department. Welcome, everybody. Jasmine, you can take it away whenever you're ready.
Good evening. I'll wait for a couple of the, okay. Great. Tech team, can I have packet page 45, please? Okay, good evening. This is a joint public hearing on Schematic Development Plan Application SDP-9073-2021. As shown on the screen, the subject property is located within the Kentland Square Shopping Center in Zone MXD. The subject property is approximately 22.3 acres. The applicant is requesting approval for 3 infill commercial pad sites. The construction of these 3 infill sites will result in a loss of parking spaces. Therefore, the applicant's also requesting a parking waiver as part of this application. The hearing was duly advertised on December 30th and January 6th in the Washington Post and published on the city's website on December 23rd. At the present time, there are 41 exhibits in the record files. They are referenced in exhibit lists in the files. The individual exhibits may be reviewed on the city website and at City Hall during regular office hours. Any objections to the receipt of any exhibit should be noted prior to the closing of the record. Otherwise, they'll be deemed received in evidence. Tech team, can I have the next page, please? And I will have Vince Burke from Saul, who's going to start the presentation this evening.
Thank you, Jasmine. Good evening. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, go right ahead and welcome.
Great. Appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity to present to you tonight. As Jasmine said, I'm Vince Burke with Saul Centers. Wanted to say hello to council members Henderson and McNulty. It's a pleasure to meet you over Zoom. Look forward to working with you in the future. First, want to introduce our team. Gary Unterberg with Rogers Consulting will be on with us and walk you through the presentation. Matt Gordon and Bob Dalrymple, our land use counsel with Selzer Gervich, and Mike Workowski with Wells and Associates is our traffic consultant and analyze the parking on our behalf. As Jasmine said, we are here for the SDP to present 3 new single-story retail buildings along Main Street. We hope to continue our success with the recent developments we've had along Kentland Square Place. I know I've been out to visit the Starbucks a number of times and know folks are enjoying that. It's I've heard the same from the community members. Shake Shack should be getting under construction any day now. We're hoping that starts this week, hopefully. And so you know, we're turning the corner here to Main Street and looking to continue on that success. Again, there's been great demand throughout our portfolio nationally. We have centers from New Jersey down to Florida and Georgia for these pad sites, infill kind of pad sites. Particularly excited about the opportunity here at the Kentlands because these pad sites marry up very well with the master plan street grid and allow us to create, you know, more of a street frontage, more of a streetscape, you know, wider sidewalks, nicer finishes to those, increased walkability and placemaking opportunities that we know that the Kentlands community really enjoys. So, you know, again, looking to continue with what we've built on there already. So in preparing for this, we work closely with staff and we're always appreciative of that. They're very helpful. And we're carrying forward both the design guidelines and the drive-through best practices guidelines that we worked on the last round here. And lastly, you know, in advance of the meeting, we reached out to a number of the community representatives. We met with the Kentland Civic Association, the Lakelands Community Association. The presentation was well received. Everybody seemed to be excited about it. We've made ourselves available to the folks at the Colonnade as well, but that hasn't been scheduled yet, and looking for a date with the chamber. So we'll continue to reach out, and we're always available. If anybody needs to find us, they can look at our solcenters.com website, and my contact information is on there. With that, I can turn it over to Gary. He can walk through the presentation, and then from there, obviously, we can have some Q&A about the project. Thank you.
Good evening, Gary Unterberg. Happy New Year with Rogers Consulting. And I think after I'm done, Matt Gordon's going to do a summary and talk about next steps. So if I could have the next slide, please. This is an aerial photo of the property. It's bounded by Kentland Boulevard to the south, Great Seneca Highway to the east, Booth Street to the west, and then the Colonnade condominium neighborhood is to the north. Next slide, please. This is an aerial photograph of the site. We've took some liberties and colored in the most recent activity. Right in the middle of the site is Chipotle for reference, the blue building. We have Lowe's to the lower right, At Home to the upper right, Giant Food to the upper left. Again, bounded on the east by Great Seneca Highway. The lower left, you'll see where Kentland's Boulevard comes into play. One of the key items that this center was set up with was a grid of streets, and that's was on purpose many years ago with the planners with Kentland's. And if the roundabout on Kentland's Boulevard is an extension of Main Street, and that comes into the site, and then that's the Main Street is the main street that travels east to west or west to east, and on this plan is left to right. More recently, we have named the main street, or I should not say Main Street because I'm going to mess everyone up, including myself. But more recently, the northern street that goes from Kentland's Boulevard from up through the site to the north has been renamed Kentland Square Place, and that's where Starbucks is located. And we've highlighted Starbucks to the lower part of the site in blue with the drive-through. The soon-to-be Shake Shack is the other blue square. The orange or the tan square in between that comes next as we go from the lower part of the page up is a pad site that's approved, that has not been built yet or approved yet as far as site plan as part of that Starbucks SDP. And then in the middle is the blue square, which is Chipotle. And then we're proposing along Main Street from left to right, three new buildings that would address the street, address Main Street, and those would be known as F, G, and H. Next slide, please. This is a couple photos to show you what's going on site. This is Starbucks. The new street we have established, particularly the pedestrian-friendly street, which is now Kentland Square Place. The buildings address the street. We have 16-foot wide brick sidewalks, new street lights, new street trees, and landscaping. Next slide, please. We're also encouraging outdoor seating with these new buildings. And this is, again, the Starbucks and the outdoor seating they're providing. Next slide. This continues similar view as we go north on Kentland Square Place. In particular, if you notice the green grass, this is the end of Starbucks just to the right, but the green grass site is where Shake Shack is going to go. And next slide. And this is the rendering from Shake Shack. The building and the site plan was approved last July. As Vince mentioned, we're literally a day, maybe a couple days away from Shake Shack pulling the building permits and the building and all permits for construction. And Shake Shack, again, embraces our pedestrian realm or pedestrian sidewalk system that we're incorporating and outdoor seating. Next slide, please. This is a shot of the design guidelines that have been approved for Kentland Square. These were approved in 2018 with the Starbucks SDP. The cover sheet shows Chipotle, which has been there for a few years now. And in particular, it's mentioned in the draft staff report, but the design guidelines are the overarching criteria that we are working to and going forward with. In particular, they're establishing the principles for the walkable streets, the streetscape, which includes our trees and lighting and materials. Also, it includes storefront design for the buildings themselves, but also allows each of the different future tenants to have their own corporate identity and their own marketing program. And also the design guidelines also address the requirements for tenant signage. And those were started by the Chipotle building, but have been carried through with Starbucks and now Shake Shack. And then as we move forward, the other buildings would be move forward under these guidelines. Next slide, please. This is Main Street looking towards Lowe's. On the right is Chipotle with their main entrance. And then on the left-hand side of the street is the area we're talking about tonight, where the 3 buildings would go that would address Main Street and help improve and extend the streetscape and the pedestrian realm that we're looking to improve with the site. Next slide, please. This goes back to the aerial photo with the plans and the buildings layout. And particularly, I want to talk about the 3 new buildings that are proposed, which are along Main Street. And if we go to the next slide, we'll zoom in to that area. And on the left is building F, which is 9,100 square feet. This would be a multi-tenant building. And again, it would work with the design guidelines as we go forward with site plans, assuming the SDP is approved. Again, the buildings address the street. They're pushed up to Main Street, creating a public pedestrian realm. Between building F and building G, there's additional outdoor space to encourage outdoor seating. And again, creating that public realm, pedestrian realm. Building G is identical to building F at 9,100 square feet. Again, will be a multi-tenant building, and it will be dependent on cars parking and walk-up service, whether it's restaurants, office, or professional uses as allowed by the code. As we go to the 3rd building, which is on the right-hand side, which is building building H. This is 3,500 square feet, which would be a drive-through restaurant, most likely. Again, the building is pushed up to Main Street with the pedestrian and the public realm space. And then the drive-through is introduced working with the city's best practices guidelines. And this one's a little bit different than Starbucks, which was a longer S-curve to obtain the 200-foot minimum stacking distance. And this is showing 2 drive-through lanes to accomplish that stacking distance, working with the city's best practice guidelines. With the packet, there is a memo and a report from Wells & Associates addressing adequate public facilities and traffic, with the traffic study that is adequate. And also there's a parking memo talking about the parking numbers in particular. We are asking for a parking waiver of 221 spaces. The parking memo goes through the background and the numbers and justifies the uses with the center and how that waiver is justified. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt Gordon to talk about any additional findings and next steps. And we also have Mike Wachowski with Wells & Associates with our team available if there's any questions after Matt's done.
Thank you, Gary. Good evening, Mayor Ashman, members of the council, members of the Planning Commission. Matt Gordon from the law firm of Selzer Gurvich with Bob Dalrymple on behalf of the applicant. We're excited to be here tonight to discuss this project that is an extension of the commercial building sites that are going in on the adjacent parcel that both Vince and Gary talked about, the Shake Shack and the Starbucks. We want to thank Jasmine and the rest of the planning staff for their hard work on the SDP over the last few months. with their comments and feedback, we think it's resulted in a better overall project design and layout. I just wanted to touch on a couple points as Gary alluded to. As described in our justification statement, we believe that the SDP satisfies all the required findings that the council must ultimately make to approve the application under the zoning ordinance. There's 7 required findings, and we've gone through that in Exhibit 39 in the record to document how this SDP, very similar to the previous SDP on the Lowe's parcel that was approved several years ago, satisfies all those required findings. And one thing in particular that Gary picked up on that I wanted to highlight is we are requesting a parking waiver of 221 spaces. And the detailed parking demand and supply analysis that Wells and Associates prepared is Exhibit 33 in the record. And we just wanted to note that as part of this process, we're asking for the council to recognize that the appropriate number of parking spaces can be reduced based upon the unique conditions and mix of uses at the property. And we would ask that you take some time to review those findings that your staff also identified in their preliminary analysis. But in short, that analysis demonstrates that there are 340 surplus spaces on a weekday, as well as 235 surplus spaces on a Saturday during the peak shopping season in December throughout the Kentland Square Shopping Center. So even with this 221 space reduction, there's a ton of excess parking. And then more specifically in what we're identifying as lots 3 and 4, which are the areas that will be impacted by the proposed building sites. There are 282 surplus spaces on a weekday and 222 surplus spaces on a Saturday during the peak shopping season in December. So the excess spaces that are proposed to be removed to accommodate these commercial sites in that area, there's a tremendous amount of parking to meet the demands at the center, which has been operating even through the pandemic very successfully with sales revenues and growth consistent, in terms of just as well as it's ever operated. In summary, we believe that the waiver would enhance the public health, safety, and general welfare because the replacement of these excess spaces with streetscape improvements and the creating more of a pedestrian grid will support multimodal circulation through the property. It'll also allow for additional landscape areas, public space, and stormwater management, as well as street activating commercial uses that will enhance the city's commercial tax base. We thank you for your time and consideration and are available to answer any questions that you have tonight or at subsequent work sessions.
Thank you all very much for the presentation. I'm excited in general and particularly excited about having Shake Shack there. But I have a couple questions. First, Matthew, to your point, and I know that we have a memo in our package from Gary Unterberg about the parking waiver you guys are seeking. And I understand if you look at the Kentland Square area as a whole, currently there's a lot of excess parking. But it does seem like the configuration of the buildings with Shake Shack eating into the Lowe's parking lot, and then the 3 buildings along Main Street sort of encroaching on an area that I think a lot of people use to park for Chipotle. Now the Chipotle people and Shake Shack and Lowe's and Starbucks are all sort of going to be in that same lot. So while the shopping center, Kentland Square as a whole, may have some available spaces, there's going to be an impact on people who regularly use it, because the spaces won't be in the same place. They won't necessarily be particularly convenient to Chipotle or to Lowe's necessarily. So what do you have to say on that score? I'll address it to Gary. Gary, unless somebody else wants to take it. Vince, you want to take it?
Sure. Well, and Gary, go ahead and supplement, but just want to reiterate what Matt said. Can you hear me? Okay. So reiterate what Matt said. It's not only were we performing, in this post-pandemic environment at par with what we were before, we saw record sales from Giant and Lowe's. At Home's doing very well as also. They're very pleased. So these are our biggest parking demand generators, and even with the addition of these pad sites in front, it's working great. I mean, Lowe's was doing $1 million in sales more a month. Giant was up 20% for year 2020. Don't ask me why I got those numbers, one in the aggregate sales volume or monthly sales volume and one in percentage, but that's how they were reported to me. I guess comes in that way. But either way, that's consistent throughout, all of our holdings in our portfolio, as well as, I work on acquisitions of new deals and seeing all this come in. It fits with the narrative of kind of, the return of folks to the suburbs, and also, dining from home preferences and home improvement while we're all stuck at home. So it all stands to reason that the sales in these places are really cranking, and the parking fields there more than met the demand. Obviously we understand some folks might have to reroute some of their parking locations where they have habitually parked for certain uses. But, given, the goals of the master plan and utilizing this street grid and the walkability and the improvements that are going along that with the wide brick paver sidewalk and creating that streetscape and a much friendlier place to walk, we're hoping to balance both those things. We certainly don't want to hamstring ourselves in any way for the ability to attract tenants or keep the ones that we have happy. That's counter to our business and to our own best interest. So, we've studied it with Mike, which backs up our own operational observations, and, are relying on the data there. And you can see in the aerial where it's layered over again, there's large swaths of parking that are really underutilized. So Gary, Mike, Matt, if you want to supplement, please.
Well, I'll just add one thing to that, and I'll let Mike Workowski speak to the memo itself as far as the methodology for the parking study. But we actually had this similar question when we met with the KCA, and one of the members said, I park across the street when I go to Chipotle, I park right across the street, and you're putting a building where I park. And my response was, well, you'll still be able to park across the street, but you may have to walk 100 feet or so further. And part of this whole goal is to get more people walking, and that if you can park at one space in the middle of the parking lot, then you can walk to Giant, but they can also walk and make it a pleasant walk to one of the restaurants and spend some time in the center, but park in one place versus parking right at the front door of one of the restaurants. So we think we're providing a better walkability factor and a nicer public realm for the center with these additional buildings. And with that, I don't know if there's any questions about the methodology, and Mike's available to answer questions on the actual parking study.
Yeah, Gary, I can jump in and add a little bit here. As mentioned, we prepared the parking analysis. We did that by, looking at how the center is operating today. We adjusted those parking numbers to reflect the peak season and such. And really those two parking areas that we're talking about, we know are the most underutilized out there. I think Gary or Vince, whoever mentioned this, it's really, there will be some displacement as persons that are using that part of the lot. But I think the short distances that we have and the environment that we're going to create will make it much different than walking from just a straight parking field to get, in between cars and rows and all those things. If we have a nice sidewalk and street trees, and we're kind of transitioning to that walkable place, that's how we really see it operating.
All right, I saw some hands go up, but before I get to you guys, I have one more question, and it's about the configuration of the drive-through. So I see the plan has this sort of bifurcated system here. Whoever wants to answer this can answer this, but how does it work? Like where's the traffic coming from one lane or for the other lane? Just walk me through how this works.
I can walk you through that. Maybe if we can pull up page 56, which has the enlargement of the area. So we have to the right is the drive aisle in the parking lot, and that would be used to access the two one-way aisles that go into the drive-through. And you can access that from the south or the bottom of the page, or you can access that also from the north or the top of the page. And by establishing two separate one-way drive-through, you enter on the right and you go to the left with the arrows. There'd be two stacking lanes, and then there'd be also two boxes or ordering bays that you would order at. And then those would be merge in to pick up your food at the building. And then one lane would exit as you continue going left, and that goes up to the, you can see a little bit of striping as you continue up to the parking. And we've, working with staff, we've added a pedestrian sidewalk that would connect over from the parking lot, but also that would have a stop sign. So traffic exiting the drive-through would stop for pedestrians. Again, I think overall it's two stacking lanes that would merge into one pickup window. And then when you do all the measurements, we're over the minimum is 200 feet for stacking, and we're over that minimum. And also we've had discussions with staff is at site plan when we have specific architecture and know the exact location of the window and how the lanes work. We're hoping to improve on that and get a little bit more stacking as we go forward. Hopefully, does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does. I just one follow-up. If in practice, if we find that one of the lanes, because I'm not doing traffic studies here, so this is just totally anecdotal. I acknowledge that, but I see much more traffic coming in from the south than from the north. So if it turns out that there's one that people really want to come into that south lane, how would you guys handle a situation like that?
Well, I think even coming from the south, you'd still have the option to enter into either or one or the other of the entrance aisles into the drive-through. So and whether
that's not just a right in that north lane. I see that.
Correct. It did not. So if 90% of the traffic was coming from the south, they'd all have access to either lane.
Gotcha.
And then whether we need to do stop signs or any other controls as we go forward, that's something we'll take a look at.
Okay, thank you. So first hands I saw were Danny Winborn and Phil Wessel. We'll go to Danny, and then I saw Ryan Spiegel too. So we'll go to Danny, Phil, and then Ryan.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. 221 spaces sounds like a great deal, and my esteemed colleague, Mr. Hopkins, Commissioner Hopkins, loves it when we take away spaces. So I just wanted to get that little dig in on him. But realistically, I have a small concern about the Lowe's parking, because Lowe's uses a lot of their spaces right outside their garden center. They have like mulch and sod and other items taken up those spaces. So practically and realistically and real, real perception wise, was that kind of taken into consideration? I'm not sure that it was, but those spaces are being utilized. And I don't think, if they've got mulch and all kinds of other, seasonal items there, then that might cause an additional issue. So I'm concerned about that. So I'd like to hear your take on that.
Yeah, maybe I take
Mike,
the.
you can. Go ahead, Gary.
I was gonna say I'll take the first shot, and then Vince, I know you have agreements with Lowe's, but if you could bring up slide 55, which has the overall center, and this shows obviously Lowe's, and then the drive-through is just north of Lowe's, and right now Lowe's does use, and it's the parking lot that's a part of the parking lot that's closest to Great Seneca Highway all the way to the right-hand side is what Lowe's has been using. And I know Saul has been working with Lowe's, and we've also had a few discussions with staff, because each year there is a temporary permit that Lowe's needs to apply for the temporary usage of the mulch and flowers and so forth in the spring. And Vince, I'll let you follow up if there's, because I think Saul has the control over that, and how much Lowe's uses or doesn't use as we go forward is one of the answers. The other thing is we also, I think it's yearly, there's a permit that's applied for by Lowe's for the temporary use of the parking lot. So if there are issues in the future, there's a couple control mechanisms, one with Saul as the owner, and then two as the city with the temporary use of the parking.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. I was just going to say, in addition to that, the surplus more than accounts for the spaces utilized by Lowe's. So there's still a surplus in excess of that. And, it's on us to actively manage that and have them, tighten that up. And that's through our property management group. And so we'll continue to do that. We do have an agreement in place with them, but in the long term, should it become an issue, which we don't foresee, we can revisit that and, either relocate or farther limit the area.
Okay, I'd like to hear more about
But
that.
Mike, Mike, do you want to speak to that at all, Mike?
Yeah, so when we collected our counts and such in the field, there were some spaces, in that area that were blocked off. So we sort of accounted for that, if you will, in the counts we collected, but we took those counts sort of mid-year, and then we looked at the monthly distribution for retail uses to see how that would translate to the peak season, which is in December. So I guess, if all these were to hit at the same time, I agree that it would push more persons over to the, kind of the north and east, if you will, on the page. But I think when more of those spaces are taken out of service for the garden center and such, those are other times of the year when the overall shopping center is operating at a little bit lower level. So it takes some of the pressure off because of the seasonal variation of all the uses that you have.
Okay, thank you. I look forward to seeing more about that when you come before the Planning Commission. Thank you very much.
All right, we'll go to Phil Wessel.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Danny. My comment was headed in the exact same direction as you were. I think, coming from my perspective, it is a little concerning that the traffic analysis is completely silent on the reality that we all know is out there today. I don't think we're just talking about 2 rows in front of Lowe's for some plants, although that takes up an amount of space. There are probably the full 2 or if not 3 rows along Great Seneca in front of At Home that in peak summer is completely full of Lowe's bulk mulch. So we're not talking about 30 spaces or 20 spaces. My wife knows I spend more than enough time and money in that Lowe's and have experienced just about every parking problem there as possible. And it is not, you go to there in the summer, it is a significant amount of space. I mean, even now they've got a row down by the pro entrance that's completely taken up with gas grills and lawnmowers in the middle of winter. So I think if we're going to do this analysis and have it hold water, I think we need to see something that fully acknowledges that, and also acknowledge, if that's restricted, a huge amount of Lowe's business, again, not necessarily our problem as a planning department, but how is their summer business going to function if you're restricting their ability to store bulk mulch and to, double the size of their garden center by taking up a quarter of the parking lot? So I think there needs to be some more detailed and actual analysis of that presented for everybody's review. So that was my main comment on the parking side of things. The only other, more question is, I'm assuming, looking at the plan along Main Street, it's intentional that there are no sort of parallel parking, like pull-in spaces for curbside to go or pickup. And, I can envision a lot of scenarios where, either the Uber Eats driver parks and puts his flashers on just for a minute to run in and get something on Main Street, or you've got a lot of people running across mid-block because there are no spots for the Uber Eats, the guys who are popping in quickly to pick something that's ready. So interested in your thoughts and whether that was considered.
So let me address the Uber question, and I'm going to use Shake Shack as an example. So the vision and how Shake Shack and Starbucks have been approved is no parking on Kentland Square Place, and variety of reasons, but that's how we're moving forward, because originally one version did have parallel parking on it, but the thought was to keep traffic moving on the quote main streets, and then limit the parking movements to the parking lot itself. And what's more than likely in the current trend and how Shake Shack was approved is no parking on Kentland Square Place, but on the parking lot side or the Lowe's side, there are 7 spaces head in right next to the building. And they also have a separate pickup window on the parking lot side. So if you order by their app or Uber or however that works, there's 7 spaces that are limited to 15-minute parking, and there's a separate pickup window. So that addresses that group of patrons. And then there's separate outdoor seating and regular indoor restaurant for the rest of the folks. So that's a trend I think we're going to see more of. And we were looking at particularly the buildings F and G. That's probably what's going to happen, where with restaurants that would go in those spaces, some of those immediate spaces that are shown on top of those pads or those buildings right now would probably be limited for parking, but they would facilitate those folks that are either Uber or the folks that order on an app and just stop in and pick up and then go.
What is your confidence level that's actually going to work? Because if you drive around this mall on a Friday night, and I am admittedly guilty of, throwing my flashers on and stopping behind the 6 other cars that are in front of Coal Fire or in front of somewhere else to pick up food. So I agree, it's a good plan. But if the plan doesn't work, you've got a road with a lot of people stopped up there. So I guess, is that a city enforcement thing? Is that Saul enforcement? How are you going to keep people from doing what they're predisposed to doing, which is whatever's fastest?
Well, and I think that's the key. And we maybe talk about enforcement, but I know there's no center police out here, or obviously it's not a city police responsibility. But I think if we do make it convenient and fastest, because I'll use Shake Shack as the example again. So if you pull over, put your flashers on, you need to walk all the way around to the other side of the building to get to the pickup window. So it's going to be a lot easier to drive around the corner, park in that dedicated spot, jump out of your car, pick up at the window, So I think by making the easiest option available, getting to the, reserving the spots at the pickup window is going to go a long way to, because it's going to be harder for you to park, put your flashers on, run around the other side of the building. So, and I don't know if that's a perfect answer, but hopefully we can make it the easier access point to get to the pickup.
Yeah, and I can add on to what Gary was saying. I mean, I think, that is the case there at site plan. There's some design, solutions that we can work through, and we'll have to thoughtfully, consider that. I would say for like, I'm, for folks that are worried about really convenience parking, I mean, I like to hear that it's crowded. I mean, that's what we want. We want it to feel good. We want it to be active. We want to, be vibrant and have a lot of shoppers there. I always call it the Yogi Berra paradox. It's like, it's too crowded, nobody goes there anymore. I mean, half joking there, but it's, with this, these are not we're not ready for the sketch plan that we came through with the vertical mixed use buildings, but we are utilizing the master plan grid in a more urban condition. And along with that, there are some growing pains there and some, issues that arise, that are not particular to convenience, retail and vehicular oriented retail. So this is, you're getting the street front condition and the placemaking and the wide sidewalks. And, if we have to work through enforcement and design issues to help assist in rolling that out and making sure it's done thoughtfully, we're certainly here for that. And we know you guys will take that approach as well.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. Tech team, if you can take down the share screen just so I can see everybody. Sorry, I know it's more work that way. Oops. So we're going to go to Ryan, we're going to go to Rob Wu, and then I see Jim McNulty's hand and Lisa Anderson. All right. So go ahead, Ryan.
Thanks, Mayor. I had two topics that I wanted to address. One is more specific and the other one's more of a big picture issue. So the first, just going back to some of the mayor's questions about the double stack drive-through. I understand what the applicant is proposing here and conceptually how it's supposed to work, and the fact that regardless of whether you're coming from the north or south in the parking lot drive aisle, that you could turn into either one of the two double stacked drive-through lanes, and that when you add it all up, it sort of meets the requirements of our staff best practices memo. I understand that, but the staff best practices memo, which is, I believe, Exhibit 29 in our record, doesn't really address double stacked lanes for drive-throughs as far as I could see. And I can't think of any examples offhand of ones in the vicinity that use this same design and have a forced merge lane in there at the end of the double stacking. And I think it would be helpful if you could point us to any examples so we can just get a better understanding logistically of how these things work, or maybe provide some additional data on how they work. I think that would be helpful for us to consider in the record. So I'll just throw that out there. You're welcome to respond to that if you want, but it's really more of a suggestion than a question. But I put that out there. The second point, which is really more of a bigger issue, is this issue of the interplay with the larger 2017 sketch plan. And this is discussed in our staff's preliminary background report on pages 4 and 5, where they talk about, the sort of interrelationship between this SDP application being intended for near-term redevelopment, while we have this other sketch plan, SK 7503 from 2017, which was a much more intensive, dense, longer-term redevelopment plan for this section of Kentland Square in accordance with our commercial district master plan. And it sounds to me from staff's analysis here that there isn't necessarily anything about going forward with this interim lower density, lower height commercial development that would preclude the realization of the vision that's in the 2017 sketch plan. And I should say, kind of as an aside, we certainly appreciate the commercial investment that's been made and is being made in this center currently, and realize that this is an interim development. But maybe staff can address this, or maybe I guess if some of the applicant representatives want to address this as well, that everybody's kind of joint understanding of how all of these plans that have been approved, or this SDP that may be approved, work together and overlay each other so that we can have interim smaller scale development, but still work toward the goal of a much denser, longer term redevelopment that was contemplated in the 2017 sketch plan. I hope that question made sense, but I don't want it. I want us to be, making progress, but I don't want us to be making progress on something small at the expense of something big.
Thank you, Councilmember Spiegel. I can take a shot at this just initially, and then staff may have some thoughts. But this question came up 3 or 4 years ago with the SDP for the Starbucks and now the Shake Shack. And there is a memo that staff, I think Rob Robinson and others put together that's really detailed. It's exhibit, just looking at exhibit 28. In the staff's position, which we agree with, is that the original sketch plan that this Kentland Square was developed under, that they're vested rights with based upon final site plans and SDPs that were approved and constructed for these improvements, so that the 1997 master plan continues to apply in the sense that the recommendations are redevelopment of the surface parking lots with additional commercial uses, which is what this interim vision is attempting to accomplish. And then when the commercial district special study came along, it does the longer term vision that you mentioned is sort of embodied in that document, but it also acknowledged that there would be a need for interim uses, so that you can sort of marry both of those master plans together, and that there is some consistency. And I think Vince touched on this, that essentially these types of infill buildings will be complementary to, when the time comes when the market will support it, for more dense mid to high rise vertical construction, that it all can operate in a compatible manner. So we think that there is a sort of a way that you can interpret and apply the original vision from the 97 master plan with what came now, I guess 14 years ago with the commercial district study, that both of those can work together until the time when the market will support the longer term vision.
Thanks.
All right, we're going to go to Rob Wu, and then Jim McNulty, Lisa Henderson, Wood Kaufman.
Thanks, Mayor, and thank you, gentlemen, for the presentation tonight. My questions and concerns are kind of in line with a lot of what's been asked before. One of them, which Councilmember Spiegel just touched upon, which is kind of whether this interim development would impede or complement future long-term development, and the higher density that we had all talked about a few years ago, and I think would be a welcome addition to the area. So I won't belabor that point. I did, when we first approved the 3 interim infill buildings, the Starbucks and the Shake Shack, have concern about the parking. And so I'd like to kind of dwell on that a little bit and maybe point you to recent development down in Cabin John Village, where they really stacked a lot of high demand restaurants in what in my mind's eye is a similar fashion to this. And the result has been really a parking nightmare in the close-in areas. And then the further out areas look pretty filled to me as well. So I have even more concern that we're going to be adding more structures to the area, and where, at least in my mind, was kind of the overflow parking for the buildings that were already approved. You know, I'm also thinking that you may be underestimating the popularity of Shake Shack and their delicious chicken sandwiches, and the amount of traffic that will bring kind of into the near end. So I will be interested in seeing a more perhaps mindful and perhaps even parking radiuses around buildings, because again, Shake Shack draws a lot of folks, whereas other buildings may not. And so there will be conflict with respect to near end parking there. What I do hear, and I'll just go through my list and then we can, if there's comments on it, I'd appreciate that. What I am hearing is a successful parking lot or successful retail leading to parking that may not be as close. And what that leads to is more walking. Phil had mentioned, for example, a mid-block crossing, which seems apparent from the design. If folks are parking further out in the parking lot and they want to come, for example, to Shake Shack, they're going to be crossing Main Street, which is a main thoroughfare of entry into the parking lot. So I'd like to hear more about kind of a mindfulness surrounding traffic flow and pedestrian safety. And I'll point to, for example, Kimco across the way. I think it did a pretty good job in marking a pedestrian crossing on the one side of their Paseo, and then kind of forgot about it on the other side, where folks, I know it's in interim use because they do have development plans for the parking lot, but crossing that parking lot across a thoroughfare into the Paseo has been kind of risky in my mind. So I'd like to hear more about thoughts on how to have a more mindful approach to pedestrian safety as these buildings come in. Thank you.
Gary, do you want to handle that?
Sure. Although I think we've been given a homework assignment to to look at how our pedestrian network and the parking works.
That's fine. It's fine too. If you guys say you hear the comment and you want to get back to us.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I do understand that I'm counting the number of fans of Shake Shack, and I agree with everybody. But that's we'll factor that in the mix too. So,
yeah,
but yes, I understand, and we'll take a look at it.
Gary, if I could,
I would also go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to add, you know, as we look at that design, I think, you know, where Main Street, where those main intersections are, there are some brick paver crossings out there. So it's going to kind of change the character, the way things, you know, are operating today. So I think it will change the character of how that works. I'm not so sure that kind of a, you know, we got to be careful where additional crossings might be, but I think it would be worth, you know, taking a look more closely over on the kind of the eastern side towards where the Lowe's is, just to be sure that we make those right connections in the right location. So I understand the concern there.
Yeah, no, and Mr. Mayor, if I could just add, you know, just the comment before about the drive-through and whether it's an enforcement issue or an engineering issue. I think that we should do all that we can at the engineering level to not have it become an enforcement issue. And so specifically with respect to pedestrian crossings, the potential of pedestrian crossings because of the movement of traffic patterns from the moving of parking patterns and therefore the movement of walking patterns. I really think we have to be mindful at the engineering level, for example, to provide the crossings that are necessary for the logical flow of pedestrians, including engineering to slow what is human nature sometimes, which is to go fast when you can, so that the pedestrians are afforded the ability to dine and live. I say that glibly, but provided a safe conditions for their ability to transgress the places that do have traffic.
Yeah, understood.
All right.
I was just going to add a couple things to go back to as Gary said, we're happy to study both, what's the best way to ensure pedestrian safety and where those best crossings are and how that might function. We'll take a closer look at all of that, as well as, flesh out some of these parking issues. In terms of does this prevent the long-term vision, the ability to get to some of those larger, vertical mixed-use buildings? Our answer is no. You certainly have smaller buildings like this in urban conditions, Georgetown, Bethesda, for example, but the Bethesda plan focused the retail streets to both Bethesda Avenue and Norfolk to maintain pedestrian scale and place the larger buildings behind, because they thought that felt better for the shoppers along those main streets. So it is actually kind of a thoughtful design. And also that sketch plan takes up both the entire at-home building and that lot. So there's the ability to phase it in and get to some of those buildings when they become, economically viable for us to get to that. We're not looking to prevent that. And so we don't think that anything we're doing here blocks us from, that eventuality. And they can work well together. It happens often, in an urban condition.
Thank you, Vince. So I just want to, we're going to go to Jim and Lisa and Lloyd and then Neil, and just want to give everyone a heads up. You try to make it sort of concise. We have another public hearing after this. We got to get to the public, and so I want to make sure everyone gets a chance. Jim, you go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I appreciate the warm welcome. Thank you for the presentation. I wanted to amplify some of the questions that Council Members Wu and Spiegel had surrounding the drive-through and pedestrian safety with the drive-through. In reading through the record and looking at the approval process for the Starbucks, I note that the Planning Commission required in item 3 on STP 7712-2017 that the applicant was required to adjust the flow so that the egress from the drive-through was not going to cross pedestrian a crosswalk. And as I'm looking at your plans, there are 7 or so spots to the side, but it would seem that the bulk of the parking is going to be on the other side of the parking lot or the drive-through. And I'm concerned that you're going to have a number of people that are going to be looking to make a left-hand turn to come out of the drive-through and not be looking to the right, particularly with the addition of mature trees there. So I'm just really concerned that that's kind of a recipe for disaster, and would definitely recommend a similar approach that was taken with Starbucks to not put pedestrians in the path of the egress. The other thing I would note, Commissioner Wessel mentioned, there's design and then there's user experience. And in seeing the double stack, we do have 2 double stack drive-throughs in the area. There's a double stack at the McDonald's in Flower Hill, and there's a double stack at the McDonald's in Crabs Branch. And I've witnessed that those definitely queue back farther than what is distributed here. And if you think about a use case, if, for example, Chick-fil-A decided that they wanted to take that, you look at the Chick-fil-A in Germantown and the amount of cars that queue there, I'm concerned that that ends up backing up onto Main Street and affecting the traffic coming in off of Great Seneca. So I think those are 2 areas that need to be looked at. And finally, I just had questions on F and G, whether there were going to be customer entrances on both sides of the building facing Main Street and facing the parking lot. Thank you.
Gary, do you want to, or Vince, either one of you guys?
So yeah, I'll just chime in. So I do think we have some homework to do as I'm taking notes here. We'll listen back to the pedestrian safety, the drive-through, and then I know there's other examples of drive-throughs that we can look at. And then F and G, we're definitely going to follow the design guidelines with entrances. Foresight architecture. We want the buildings from Main Street that address the street to look like that's the front, and obviously we'll also have basically 4 fronts as that works, although we always have a service side, but that's that we have the design guidelines to go by, and also as we go forward with the site plan, that would be detailed out.
The only thing I'd add there is the only thing I'd add is that, you know, those two buildings are, you know, those will be stall design buildings. You know, I know we've had discussions with both Shake Shack and Starbucks where you're trying to work within the brand constraints, and they have their brand and, you know, their aesthetic and how their store functions. You know, this architecture, we will build these, you know, to lease to various shops, and the architecture is at our control, and we very much intend to do four-sided architecture and you know, activate both sides. You know, it's vital for those businesses and our leasing folks to have success, to have that connection to the parking lot, as everybody's demonstrated in the desire to have that function, you know, in their comments. But also, we want it to feel good along the street and look like it's a front. And there's opportunity for some of those, particularly the end caps and the ones, you know, around that central public, you know, the open space or cafe seating area that, you know, you could have entries on both sides. So that anyway, that'll be fleshed out in the architecture and site plan, but we very much understand the goals there.
Thank you. Jim, did you have any more questions?
No, thank you.
All right, we'll go to Lisa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had 2 points to 2 questions, and one Councilmember Wu and McNulty have already raised in terms of the safety of pedestrian crossing. So I won't belabor that point, but thank you for taking that as homework so that we can take a better look at that. Thank you for the presentation. This has been helpful. My second question is around, as we move parking spaces out further to benefit what you are presenting as walkability, so people will walk further because they park further. And then the spaces that are closer to the buildings and dedicated to 15-minute, you know, pick up and go type parking. I didn't see anything in the plan, and this may be my old eyes, about reserved handicap spaces. So has that been taken in consideration, where handicap spaces will be? Will it be adequate and effective for those who need it?
So handicap spaces, absolutely. And with the schematic development plan, we have not gone into those details yet. But at site plan, front and center, we need to or required to have handicap spaces, and with the appropriate ratio. Right now, the center overall has that, but as we add 3 buildings, we will be adding handicap spaces. And then we will also have to show the accessible route to the doors. So what we've talked to staff about this, the one thing we don't know is where the doors are going to be at. So once we figure out the doors with the final architecture, we will definitely have handicap spaces, not only per code, but as appropriate. So
thank you. I look forward to that.
I do want to note that on sheet 74, they do show potential locations of ADA spaces. So that has been looked at this stage, but ADA path, that'll be looked at when the final building footprint design. But for now, they have identified places where ADA spaces will be located for the sites.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go to Lloyd, then Neil, then John Bauer. Lloyd, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and welcome to the new members of the council. An observation and then a comment, or comment then observation. My comment is, we keep talking about the Saul property, but there's something else there. It's also the Kimco properties. And for many years, I've been advocating putting the two together in terms of what I would call the Great Wall of Kentland's Boulevard, because people don't want to cross that street. And somehow, in order to maximize both the pedestrian safety as well as the cars, the parking situation, I think we have to look more closely at Kentland's Boulevard once again as to how to integrate that more into the community so that people do feel safe crossing that street. And at this point, I think it actually is a barrier. So people don't want to park at the Kimco lots and walk across the street to let's say to Starbucks. I think that needs to be looked at more closely by multiple parties. My observation is that Looking at the drive-through, it appears from the way you've got it now currently sketched out, there are at least a half a dozen spaces that actually interfere with the way the stacking would occur. In other words, if you go to slide 56, you could see that more clearly. But where the stacking occurs and where the backup would occur from the stacking, you're blocking at least a half a dozen spaces. So I would like to have the applicant work more closely with staff to try to figure out a better way of making this drive-through like we did with Starbucks. We spent a lot of time at Starbucks and it's worked out very well from my observation. I'd like to see something further developed than just the double stacking and the way it seems to be just thrown in there in the middle of a parking lot. So I would agree with a lot of the comments that have been made before, that I'd like to see more development to this before it comes before the Planning Commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Lloyd. I think the applicant gets the point. They need to fine tune that part of this schematic development plan. We're going to go to Neil Harris.
All right, so first of all, I have less of an issue with the drive-through than most of the rest of you do, but let's see what comes out of the study. Because I've seen these double stacks that seem to work okay. There's a McDonald's in Germantown and the Checkers on Shady Grove that also use them, and they're both situated in parking lots and seem to do okay. So let's see how it goes. I wanted to make one quick comment before I get to my main point in terms of when there's a giant parking lot full of spaces and you park in front of the coal fire and put your blinkers on, Phil, don't be that guy, please. All right, but my main comment goes along with what Ryan was discussing and what Matthew commented on. A few years ago, as Ryan mentioned, we saw a very ambitious plan that was brought forth by Saul about the mid-rise buildings throughout those parking lots, and we're still not seeing those being developed. I'm actually kind of shocked by the comment that the market isn't ready for that, because all we keep hearing is that there's a huge shortage of housing in the DC metro region. And you have the opportunity to provide multifamily housing in this area, and nothing's going forward. You can put housing above and retail below, or restaurants below. Why is that not happening yet? Why do you think the market isn't really ready?
Well, there's a number of factors that go into our decisions in where we, allocate capital for major development projects. They're very, very expensive. Saul is a little bit different than many developers in that we are a long-term holder and we build as such. And, we made that case during the sketch plan. And so, the product we build is meant to last because we're going to be there for all the issues. So we build that quality into it and, overbuild often. And, that's evident throughout our portfolio. I'm happy to, if anybody would like to take a tour of any of our recent development projects, happy to set that up. But you can see that in the things we build. And therefore you have to get, a high rent to justify that. Again, also we're not, we are a large developer with great capabilities, but we work very methodically through our projects. We have a large one that we just finished in Arlington, a large one that we're undertaking in Rockville, and one in Bethesda. So, we're kind of one at a time to work through these things. And, for the product that we build, the rent's not there yet. And we don't want to reduce the quality to meet a lower rent. We want, we're going to be here for the next, whatever you name it, 50, 100 years, whatever it might be. That's how we look at our building. So we don't do a lot of, wood frame development, and some of the buildings that were up closer to that CCT, the potential CCT station, which is, unresolved at the moment. We're 12 stories. That's high-rise construction, concrete and steel, structured parking, all these things very expensive. So I understand that some people will move forward on projects. And that's just not our approach. So, again, happy to walk through that in more detail and show you the kind of product we build, but that rent is not there yet for us.
Thank you very much, Vince. Neil, I'm assuming you're done, or do you have any other follow-ups here? You're on mute.
Yeah, I know. I appreciate that, but I think this subject, the ground has been very well covered. I'm very curious to hear from the public at some point as well.
Okay, that's going to happen soon, but we're going to first go to John Bauer.
I'll just do one quick point. Another for your homework assignment, Gary, please. A great presentation, but one of the things that this plan implies, and I'm not sure we got to that quickly, was the two big boxes that you're proposing are 9,000 plus square feet, and we've been talking about comparing activity around these potentially new buildings to Shake Shack to Starbucks. Something else is going to happen here at that size. At 9,000 square feet, it's a different use, and I think when you come back with some of the details on the parking calculations, what's the assumption about that? Because if it turns into, just for lack of a better comparison, another Not Your Average Joe's or Coal Fire, something that's a larger, full service restaurant kind of thing, that has a whole different implication on how long the cars are going to be in the lot when they are there, and the turnover and the potential for turnover. So just include that in that overall level of assumptions you're making about parking. The last thing I want to ask is for Vince, you can answer it quickly. You don't have to go into a long explanation, but isn't there more to this project about the rest of the center? I mean, Councilmember Neil was talking, Harris was talking about what about the big master plan, but even before that, isn't there interim stuff that should be happening, like what's confronting the drive-through building on the low side? I mean, that's certainly not a front elevation to, echo the streetscape. And whatever happens in and around this site, isn't there more to this project that would include a more comprehensive look at circulations to the parking, restricting what happens with seasonal use of the parking areas, maybe even improving some of those areas? Is that at all part of this discussion, or are you really just coming in and plopping this in the existing parking space and not going past that boundary?
To the first question, those are intended to be, the larger buildings those are, as guided by staff, those are supposed to be building lot line limits. So the exact configuration and the architecture for those buildings, they're likely to be close to that size, but they're supposed to be multi-tenant buildings, shops buildings. So didn't envision it to be one large restaurant.
Okay, fair enough.
Possible, but that wasn't the case. So, and the second question, I'm not sure I follow. I mean, some of these questions about the specificity of the layout of the drive-through and things, as Gary mentioned, when we have a tenant in hand and there is, how they approach their business, where their window is, et cetera, we can refine the drive-through. What we were trying to achieve was, not having it up on the street. We're following these best practices and creating some screening the visibility with some of the street trees and achieving the queue length. So, outside of that, I'm not sure I followed the question, and happy to do whatever, refinement or homework, as folks have been saying, to answer the question. But can you reiterate, I guess, or Gary or Matt or Mike, do you want to opine?
I think let me take a shot at it, because I think it's, I heard the word overlay with one of the previous comments, and maybe it's worth doing a diagram to show how the center works now and how it will work in the future with the denser master plan, but also as this as an interim step, how we're looking at the big picture and all the different connections and whether or not certain things stay or certain things go in the future. But I think the overriding grid that's on the site, that's what this center was built around, and that's also what the master plan, the future development is built around. And maybe that's a first step to show holistically how everything's working, not only now, but also in the future.
Thank you, Gary. John, did you have any follow-ups?
I'll leave my questions out. Let's go to the public, but we don't need to belabor it right now.
Okay. All right. This is the time Mayor and Council Planning Commission would love to hear from anybody in the public who'd like to speak on this topic. We ask that you state your name and address or neighborhood for the record. Keep your comments no more than 3 minutes. If you have more than 3 minutes worth of material, you can send us additional comments in writing and we'll consider it just like any oral testimony. Would anybody who like to speak, please use the Zoom raise hand function right now, and I will call on you. Okay, I see one hand up. Tech team, if you could bring up Mike Sesma, a very familiar name to us. Mike, you know the deal. Unmute yourself, state your name, address, or neighborhood. Go right ahead.
Good evening, council and commissioners. Appreciate the presentation from the applicant. I certainly had a lot of comments on the previous plan that included Starbucks and what was now the highly anticipated Shake Shack. I guess my main comments would follow up on a couple of comments made by council members and commissioners. That is that this is a pretty active site. It's several days of the week. Well, I'll talk about the drive-through first, because I think that's the biggest concern. Because a drive-through restaurant relies on a high turnover in traffic, and you're taking that drive-through and putting it in the middle of where a very active site, and which is very distinct from the site where Starbucks has their drive-through, which is pretty much in and out off of Kentland's Boulevard, where to get to this drive-through would be for people to drive through from multiple directions, and and if it's a successful, popular place, we're going to have stacking problems that will probably go back along Main Street and in both directions. I'm very concerned about that and the traffic that it'll generate. I guess I would also follow up on the comments made by my former colleagues regarding the master plan for this area. I'm also surprised and somewhat disappointed that we aren't seeing an activation of that plan and the urban setting that was approved and endorsed. Basically, I would say that this plan for these retail pads more or less intensifies the suburban strip mall character that is already there and that we're hoping that would be changed by the master plan that was approved and the concept for the commercial district that was approved in 2007, and then a more detailed plan was approved in 2017, I believe. So I would encourage the developers the applicant to think more about enacting those components and perhaps making this plan for these retail pads more compatible with the urban plan that we saw in that approval of the master plan. Thank you very much.
Mike, before you go, for the record,
That's my West Riding.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Do we have any other speakers on this topic? Looking for any Zoom raised hands? Going once, going twice. Okay. We don't have any other speakers, but we will have records open presumably, so that anybody who's viewing this can send us a note later and we can add it to the record. John Bauer, you look like you want to say something. Go right ahead.
No, I'm ready to step in with the script whenever, whenever you're done.
All right. Well, I think we've given the applicant a lot of homework to do before we see them again next time. So by all means, go with the script.
Okay, thank you. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission hold their record open until 5 p.m. on February 24th, 2022. That's 37 days, with anticipated recommendation on March 2nd, 2022. Is there a motion, please?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
And it's moved and seconded. All right. I'll do the roll call vote. Commissioner Wessel?
Aye.
Commissioner Winborn?
Aye.
Commissioner Kaufman?
Aye.
Commissioner Hopkins?
Aye.
And I'll vote aye as well. That passes unanimously. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, John. We will go to our recommendation, which is that we hold our record open until 5 p.m. on March 16, 2022, with anticipated final action on April 4th, 2022. What is the pleasure of the council? Rob Wu.
So moved.
Ryan Spiegel.
Second.
Okay, I will call the roll. All those in favor say aye, any opposed say nay. Councilmember Harris.
Aye.
Councilmember McNulty,
Aye.
Councilmember Henderson,
Aye.
Councilmember Spiegel,
Aye.
and Councilmember Wu.
Aye.
Carries 5-0. So our record will be open until March 16th. And we will move on to our next consolidated public hearing, which is the Travis Avenue rezoning tech team. And thank you all. I want to, before you go,
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. We will see you soon.
Thank you also.
Tech team, if you could bring up make the transition, which I realize you got a lot of people that are coming in and out for the Travis Avenue, whatever, the concept plan. It's getting late. And Laura Mayfood from our planning department is going to be leading us in this discussion.
Okay, so I'll get started. If the tech team could bring up packet page 1059. This is a consolidated joint public hearing on zoning map amendment application Z 8911-2021 and concept plan application SP 8910-2021. Notice of this public hearing was published in the December 30th, 2021 and January 6th, 2022 editions of the Washington Post. The property was posted with signs, notifications were mailed, and notice was given on the city's website. There are currently 13 exhibits in the record for application Z 8911-2021 and 21 exhibits in the record for SP 8910-2021. As you might have noticed in the packet, some exhibits are included in both records, so they were repeated. All exhibits are available on the city projects page of the city's website and available at City Hall. Any dispute of an exhibit must be presented prior to the closing of the records. The applicant, Kimco Realty, has submitted these applications for 18501 North Frederick Avenue, which is outlined in red here on this map and located at the corner of 355 and Travis Avenue. These applications propose rezoning the property from C2, which is our general commercial zone, to CD, corridor development, and developing 2 mixed-use residential and commercial buildings. And then before I hand it over to the applicant, I just want to note some of the CD zone requirements because I know it's been a while since we've had one of these applications. This is a consolidated joint public hearing because rezoning to CD requires 2 separate applications, but they are reviewed concurrently. For this project, there is the map amendment application or the rezoning, and then the concept site plan application. Concept site plans are more detailed than sketch plans that we have for our MXD zone properties. They show proposed uses and layouts, locations of buildings, roads, open space, and conceptual architecture, but they do not include as much detail or engineering as a schematic development plan. So this is just the first step in a CD zone development process, and the plans will be further refined at subsequent stages. And then one last thing I'd like to note is at the end, since this is 2 separate applications, each one will need its own motion. So if the tech team could now go to page 1074, and I will turn it over to Kimco for their presentation.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members, and planning commission members. My name is Greg Reed. I am with Kimco Realty. Joining me this evening is Abby Ocklick, also with Kimco, Matthew Fitzsimmons with Horde Copeland Mock, our architect, and James Bushheiser with Vica Engineering. We're here tonight about what we call Gaithersburg Shopping Center. It's a 90,000 square foot shopping center, approximately anchored by Floor and Decor with some small shops and 2 pad sites located. As we've talked and you've met with Kimco in the past, we've always looking at our centers for stabilizing them for the long-term future. Floor and Decor came in 2016. They're a great tenant, but they don't drive a lot of what we would call daily trips. Before we did that, we tried and looked at the opportunity to do grocery stores and were able to find one, but we found Floor and Decor. They're a great tenant. They do have control over this site for some time. So do several of our tenants. We will, as required, honor all of those leases and work with these tenants when this redevelopment comes to fruition to reestablish them and keep them in the shopping center. I just want to thank staff also, especially Rob and Laura. They're, as usually, great to work with, very professional and extremely helpful as we process this application and bring it before you this evening. We have started this process almost a year ago when we came up with this idea and initially met with staff. We've met with several of the council members, several of also of the planning commission members. We also had reach out and met with Montgomery Meadows, Lake Forest Glen, and Village Overlook back in the spring to get their feedback and input and introduce this plan, as you will see tonight. So we really believe that this center has a great opportunity for mixed use density moving forward. So what I'm going to do now is turn it over to Abby, who will sort of go through the details of this plan. And then we'll have Matthew talk about the architecture and the buildings. And then we're all here for any questions that you may have. Abby? Was she elevated to a panelist?
Hold on, couldn't find the mute button. I found it. All right. Hi, everybody. Lovely to chat with you this evening. I just want to walk through the center and kind of all of the things that we're looking for. So if you'll go to the next slide, please. You'll see this site that I hope everyone is aware of, kind of how it sits within the neighborhood. And you can also see kind of the neighborhoods that Greg mentioned that we talked to last spring about the project, as well as how we have the spectrum across the street. Next slide, please. Again, just an aerial, you can see Floor and Decor on the top right, which is the east side of the site. And then we've got some other retail parcels at the front along Frederick and Travis. Next slide, please. Existing site plan, this just shows kind of the site with the amount of retail on here that we have today. Next slide, please. Really wanted to really talk about what we're requesting with the change of the zoning and the concept plan. And so we wanted to just go through the requirements from the zoning code about how we can meet those recommendations. And so the first thing is, how can we meet the master plan recommendations? So as you can see here, we have a checklist of things that we've pulled together for you all. So it's a little bit easier to go through all these things. So you can see that we're compliant with most of the master plan recommendations following smart growth principles. We plan on meeting the green building design criteria when the buildings move forward, but also meet all the stormwater management and every other sustainability requirement by the city. Also moving forward, talking about the site-specific master plan recommendations, the master plan does recommend rezoning the site to either CD or MXD. It does recommend a mixed-use project. The only issue with the recommendation that was written actually in 2009, I believe, that it recommends an office heavy site. And as everybody knows, the market has adjusted, and with us being virtual, you all know work from home is more dominant. And so we don't see the site having the same office demand that it once did. And so we're looking at a residential heavy site, but it still has the mixed use with retail and walkable streets throughout. Next slide, please. The last thing that the zoning ordinance asks is how we comply with the zoning we're requesting. And so as we're requesting the CD zone, we have a list here of items to kind of show you that as we go through all of the points by points. I don't want to read this completely off, but you can see that big picture items. Again, smart growth principles. We're creating a gateway element into the city from the north, because that's just the nature of the site. The big issue that we have is because there's a lot of topo change, we are asking for a variance on the height request, and the CD zone doesn't allow an increase of height and stories at the recommendation of the board and planning commission, which is what we are here to ask you for today. We're not asking for an increase in height. We are merely asking, or in stories, we're merely asking for it in height. Mainly that has to do with how the height of a building is calculated and the site's topo, as the site intersection at Travis and Frederick is much lower. We'll have Matthew give you more information on that, but we really kind of wanted to, that's the main request the change. Next slide, please. Again, background request, I mentioned this briefly. Again, this is all in the statement of justification that is later on in the packet that hopefully you all were able to review. And again, really it's about kind of the changing retail environment. We're trying to set up the highest and best use for the site as we move into the future with more residential units and hopefully bringing more apartments as well as affordable housing into Gaithersburg as it's a growing neighborhood in the DMV area. Next slide, please. Now to the fun part, in my opinion, the site plan. What are we actually proposing? As you can see, there's 2 blocks kind of on the property. We're calling this building A and building B with a street that goes between. This is kind of what we're seeing as our main focal point entrance kind of node between the two, with retail with on the red lines that you can see that's kind of focused on this new street A that bisects the site, as well as on Frederick, really creating kind of an entry gateway that hopefully as time goes on and everything that's successful on the site, we can connect the pedestrians across Frederick in a way that they can cross the street successfully between us and the Spectrum and their retail. Again, we're making a main street environment is really kind of what we're seeing with kind of a walkable pedestrian sidewalk, street trees. We will have some teaser parking in the front on Frederick for the retail parkers so they can come in and get into the sidewalk. The parking is a little bit interesting, but we'll look at that on the next slide. But really, this is the overall big picture of retail and building kind of footprints for you. Next slide. Here is the vehicular circulation I mentioned. That's a little bit tricky, but hopefully easy to see in this diagram. As you can see, we have street A that bisects the site with a traffic circle in the middle. That's to really help slow down traffic, but also to allow people to kind of circumnavigate the site and not have to go to turn around due to the medians. We have the parking entrances, both off the front off Frederick, kind of on that narrow alleyway that you see in front of the retail going directly into the retail parking, but also a right in, right out on a right in only on Travis that gets you into that same retail parking. And then on the north side into Block B, there's a retail and residential parking entrance. Next slide, please. Here, we're showing kind of the pedestrian pass through the site and around the site for everybody, as well as kind of the open space. And those two are really kind of contiguous things. And so showing how we assume where we'll have all the walking paths, outdoor dining, and all of those pedestrian amenities, and then also the open space. We anticipate the open space kind of at the intersection of Travis and Frederick to really be the place for some stormwater management, some hopefully some art, but kind of a cool, great gateway moment at the intersection. The park on the opposite side is really kind of seen as a neighborhood park with the park that's across the street. So that'll be more passive and have opportunities for the neighborhood to really join the site. And then now I think the next slide, I'll hand it over to Matthew to talk about the details of our request for a height increase.
Great, thanks, Abby. And as Abby had mentioned, this development consists of 2 mixed-use buildings, and each of those sites, as I'll continue to talk about, has a different site and topographical condition. Street A that was bisecting the site, you can see in the plan in the lower right-hand corner is the white gap is the street A that cuts between the 2 gray building blocks. That's a relatively flat pedestrian-oriented street per our designs, and the intent is to have that street be framed by 5-story buildings on each side. The condition with building A, which is the building block that abuts the intersection of Travis and Frederick Avenue, is there's significant topographical change, approximately about 28 to 30 feet from Street A, where we ideally think our lobbies will be, and we'll show you where those lobbies will be in some of the renderings, down to the intersection itself. And so that creates a bit of a challenge with working within the building heights. If we take the measurement of building A around, taking the average grade plane around the block, the building is approximately, approximately 66 feet in height. However, at the northwest corner, which is kind of the corner facing out on Travis Avenue towards the intersection, we have a significant grade condition there, a low point around the building that requires about 76 feet of height. If we take the measurement per the Gaithersburg code and we measure it to the midpoint, at the midpoint of the building along Travis, as you see here in the section that's illustrated on the left-hand side of the slide, that elevation point puts us at about 68 feet, 8 inches, which is just about a little bit above 65-foot max, which is the allowable height by feet within the CD zone. So our request is for an additional 11 feet. And despite what it says here, which is a small typo on this slide, we're actually requesting 76 feet. That is reflected in the submission as well as the statement of justification. Next slide, please. Now, building B and in section B represents a whole different situation. Building B essentially sits on a relatively flat site. In general, its average, and both of these buildings are, again, as they're perceived along Street A through the site, are approximately 5 stories in height. In this case, because the building is flat, because the site is flat, the average grade plane around this building is approximately 54 to 56 feet. It's within that 65-foot allowable height. This section was cut along the open space buffer that we have, which is approximately 30 feet of landscaped width between building B and the parcel line to the east, which abuts the assembly at Watkins Mills. And you can see there's a significant topographical change leading up to the Watkins Mills neighborhood. And so between the setback and the landscaping buffer, as well as having our site lower, the 5-story height that we're proposing is not incompatible with the 3-story apartment buildings at Watkins Mills along that edge. Next slide, please. So here I'm going to take you on a tour around the site. In this bird's eye view, looking from Frederick Avenue, you can see building A on the right-hand side, and then building A on the left-hand side, and building B on the right-hand side. And you can see that in the middle between the two buildings is Street A. And in the foreground, we have the retail frontage of these buildings facing out to Frederick Avenue. The intent here is to create kind of a massing strategy where we have kind of anchored corners at the end of both buildings A and B, kind of creating a gateway into Street A, but also creates a frame, and we'll see a different view of this leading towards the roundabout, which you can see in the page center of the slide, and then where the main entrances and residential lobbies would be for these two buildings. In the foreground, we're providing a generous plaza space in front of the retail. And I think as we've kind of learned through the pandemic, the need for spill out space, plaza space for the non-residential uses is important, as well as for the residents in this development. Next slide, please. And so this is kind of the same orientation of the view, but at ground level. Street A is slightly rising up to building B in the background. And in the background, you can see this black central bay, which is really calling out the terminus of Street A before it deflects and then heads over to Travis Avenue to the left. But this is also calling attention to the main lobby of the residential buildings. And again, the intent is to have the residential lobbies kind of relate to each other across the roundabout from each other. And then out towards Frederick Avenue, as you can see here in the foreground or the midground, is the retail. Because that slight slope down to Frederick Avenue, that really affords us to have taller non-residential ground floor uses that face out to Frederick Avenue, giving us ample space for retail signage and visibility along that corridor. Next slide, please. So in this view, we are looking towards the northeast, hovering over Frederick Avenue, and you can see Travis Avenue off to the right and the intersection just off to the lower left-hand side of the page. In this view, this is looking at the taller portion of Building A in the foreground, but it also captures an intentional setback of this building from the intersection. It's roughly about 130 feet from the property line, maybe 150 to the actual curb at the intersection to the building face of Building A. In this open space that we're afforded, this gives us the opportunity to use the grades for transition up to the building, but also gives us the opportunity for landscaping, stormwater management at that intersection. Not to mention, it gives us the opportunity for public art or signage to really welcome people along the Frederick Avenue corridor to this development, but even more so to Gaithersburg and the Frederick Avenue corridor. Before we jump off of this slide, if we're peeking into the roof of Building A here, you can see the interior courtyard. This is one of the differences between Building A and Building B. Building A is the residential amenity space is sitting up above the non-residential and the parking uses of that building, and it's wrapped on all four sides by residential. It's a much more urban kind of block fitting building in comparison to Building B. So let's go to the next slide and look at Building B. So this is the view along Travis where Street A would come out to Travis Avenue, and we're looking along Travis to kind of the northeast corner. And you can see in just beyond the new street, you can see Building B, and its form, because of the flat site condition, we're not creating a podium condition below it for parking and non-residential uses, but we're actually creating an open courtyard strategy where open courtyards or three-sided courtyards are actually looking out towards the open space of the Pepco easement, which is on the left-hand side of Travis Avenue. And so this gives us the ability to transition from that more urban Building A form to kind of a transitional Building B that then just around the corner on the far left-hand side of the page, we're actually transitioning to the townhouse communities and the garden apartment communities that are further up Travis Avenue. So this building allows us to transition both scale, mass to those residential communities. And so now we've kind of walked around the proposed project. That is our last slide, and I'll hand it over for questions and answers.
Well, thank you so much for.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, if I could.
Go ahead, Greg. I'm sorry. You go ahead, please.
Sorry, thank you. I know when we met with a lot of the folks, it's been 6 months. What we heard was this is a gateway, and the architecture and the concept and the layout need to reflect that this is a gateway to the city. And understanding in concept, we can only really show blocks. What we tried to do with the architecture is show a direction that we're taking it, that these buildings, unlike what the concept plan shows, will be a flat wall. That's not what we're intending. The buildings will have undulation. We tried to step it back off the intersection so that we could either have signage or artwork on the corner. The other thing, if you look back on the site plan, there's some red lines that show the intent of where we think the retail will go. We would love to be able to say all of Street A could have street level retail, but our experience here is we just don't think there's that much available. We think the number, as we've proposed on our concept, is about 48,000 square feet, which gives us the flexibility. If we were to find a grocer of the smaller size of the 20 to 30, we could fit it in there with the flexibility with these buildings. But otherwise, we think this is either destination restaurants that people know of and are intentionally going there, or a lot of service and smaller restaurants that'll serve this local community and the community behind it. The access off of Frederick being right in, right out has always been a little bit challenging. We do have the light at Travis, which helps immensely, but it's not really, it's more of a drive-by or local retail. It's not something, unless we get a really unique restaurant, that's going to drive as a destination. So I think those are sort of the things I just wanted to add to it. Like the whole team is available for any questions or thoughts or whatever you're thinking. And thank you.
All right. Greg, thank you so much. Thanks to all of you guys for the presentation. I'll just make a general statement and not get into specifics quite yet, but just to say it's very exciting to have potential investment on the east side of the city here. I think it's a great thing. It's a potential game changer or continued game changer, continuation of some terrific momentum we have over at Spectrum. And certainly Kimco has a terrific track record in working with the city and has done some really good work here. So with that, again, I'm not pre-commenting on the project quite yet. And I see some hands going up because I have a feeling others are excited too. But before we get to that, when I met with you guys 6-8 months ago, whenever it was, before you had submitted a plan, but you were just sort of thinking, you were sort of coming up with this concept. My comment then is the same as it is now, which is the main focal point of this concept plan is sort of mid-block, and the main focal point at Spectrum is sort of mid-block. And so what's challenging is to really try to capitalize on the synergy between them and get some real pedestrian flow, because now pedestrians have to go north to Travis to make the cross, or they have to go south to Watkins Mill to make the cross. And that's a real walk. Again, walking's not a bad thing, gets us all in shape, but ideally, if there was like 1 or 2 places in the city where I could have a pedestrian bridge of some sort, this would probably be top or second on the list. It'd be in my top 2 in this area, and it would require some sort of partnership between you guys and Pete and Lee Henry over at Spectrum and SHA for 355. It seems kind of pie in the sky, but my goodness, if something like that could happen here, if you're assuming this concept plan's approved and you guys get to us with an SDP, I mean, would you guys be open to that, to even discussing that concept?
Absolutely. I think it's a great idea. I think it's a very hard idea to implement. Ideally, we've tried to keep our entrance onto Frederick lined up, because the best scenario is we get a light at Frederick for our existing entrance that aligns with Spectrum's entrance. But I don't think State Highway will ever do that either, because it's almost in the de-acceleration left turn lane for the intersection at Travis. You just don't have the spacing between the lights. The next best thing would be a pedestrian bridge over cross. So we can discuss it. I think it has a lot of hurdles. It will be difficult.
Okay, and then last question before we go to some people with hands up is, assuming this moves forward, we go through the public hearing and we approve the concept plan. How far along are you guys with an SDP to come back to us?
We have not started the SDP because I wasn't sure what the direction would take with the concept plan, what comments we could. We did do a lot of preliminary architecture and building interiors to make sure what we were proposing is functional and we can get the garage to work. We have circulation. It also, anytime, as we've talked past numerous times, is when you're putting retail on the first floor, you got to look at the loading so that the garage can access both commercial and the residential. So we've taken the architecture pretty far down. We have done our survey, but other than the preliminary stormwater we need for concept, we have not really started the next step in plans. And I think you'll hear a little bit later, I do have some lease obligations that have a few years left on them that I need to honor, as particularly Floor and Decor, but I do have some other smaller tenants that have lease obligations. As we said at Kentland, we would always try to work them into this redevelopment, and hopefully they'd stay with us and we could work them into the new program.
Okay, fair enough. Neil Harris, we're going to go to you first because we went to you last time, then we'll go to Ryan.
All right, thank you, Mayor. I was waving my hand frantically last time, so I appreciate the help this time. So first of all, thank you for the presentation, and thank you for the chance to weigh in months ago, as has already been said. I'm very impressed with the thinking so far. I think this is a great upgrade to the site. And frankly, I've been impressed with the work that you've done in Kentland so far as well. Looking forward to getting my chopped salad tomorrow. And by the way, is there really a place called Gaither's Burgers, or is that just for illustration purposes?
Notice that.
Illustration purposes.
All right, well, not a bad idea. So first of all, in terms of one of the first things that you asked for was forbearance on the height restriction. You're probably not aware of this, but in the city's long-term visioning process that we undertook several years back, it seems like 100 years ago because it was before COVID hit, we looked at going at relaxing the height restriction along the 355 corridor. So from my point of view, I mean, I'd go higher, but I understand that the economics for the building of the type that you're building is probably not going to support a 10-story building, but going a little bit higher, given the topography and all that, seems okay from my point of view. So I just wanted to let you know that. So I like the design. I hope there's a way to get in and out along Travis Avenue, especially in. I know the in along 355 is the primary design, but traffic is going to need to know that they can get in off Travis as well if you want to make this work well. In terms of amenities, are you doing some sort of outdoor amenities aside from parks? Is there going to be a pool or anything along those lines to make this building more attractive?
The residential amenity package hasn't been figured out yet, so those will be more details later on.
All right.
I think as Matthew alluded to it, though, we only show blocks on the concept, but in the middle of these blocks are courtyards where we would have amenities for the residents. One such thing would be a pool. There'd be outdoor grilling areas. This would be a Class A building and have all the amenities that you would expect coming with them.
All right, that's great, because as we've seen, especially in the times of COVID, outdoor amenities are super important as we go forward. So anyway, I don't have a lot of hard questions for you. I really like what we're seeing, and I appreciate the ambition and the investment in our city.
Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. We'll go to Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor. I definitely want to echo what Councilmember Harris and the mayor have already said and associate myself with their comments. You know, we're only a public hearing. We're not a policy discussion, but I do think it's important to provide, you know, as much of our thinking to the applicant as is appropriate. Having said that, while I know this is only concept plan at this point, and we're not getting into the fine details, you know, I appreciate what Greg said earlier about trying to provide renderings and trying to give us a flavor of what this is going to look like, you know, facades and more details that we wouldn't normally necessarily be getting into at this phase of the process. With that said, I understand your comments about the limits of retail square footage in this market, but I would encourage you to think about ways to make sure that the portion of Street A that connects to Travis, even if it's not retail on the ground floor, that it is somehow activated and engaging to pedestrians who are walking between Travis Avenue and the traffic circle. I know these are just early renderings and they don't necessarily reflect what things are going to look like as we get more fine-tuned. Some of the renderings seem to suggest, you know, you're basically looking at a flat apartment building wall from Travis Avenue to the traffic circle. And so I would just encourage you all to think about that as you go forward, even if it's not actual retail there. There's something creative that can be done there to activate the space for pedestrians. And while I salute the mayor's grand vision for some kind of pedestrian bridge across 355, whether that happens or not, I think the bigger point is to really think hard about connectivity for both pedestrian flow and vehicle flow between your property and all the surrounding and adjacent properties and amenities that are nearby. Because aside from that being just sort of a public good, I think it's going to be good for your property and for the tenants or residents who live there ultimately to have that connectivity with other amenities that are adjacent to the property. So whatever creative things you can think of, whether or not it includes a pedestrian bridge, I think we really need to do what we can to push the limits to make sure we have as much good connectivity as we can. Those are my comments, but again, I reiterate what others have said, very exciting. And we appreciate the investment you're making, which, you know, has the potential to be quite transformative in this part of the city. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. We're going to go to Jim McNulty, then Rob Wu.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. Some of my questions and comments may be premature, but since I'm new, I would appreciate the grace. I share the enthusiasm for a development such as this, particularly on the east side. I love the positioning of this property as a gateway to the city. I'm very excited about the potential for public art of a larger scale at the front of the property. I do have questions as far as access to the public spaces on the property, considering they seem to be on the outskirts and aren't necessarily integrated into the flow of, you know, where the main part of the activity in the space is going to be through Street A. And just want to make sure that, you know, whether it's through the pedestrians who may have to cross from Spectrum over at Travis, or even just the residents, make sure that they have easy access to that space and it's not just a buffer from the highway. My first reaction to looking at it, and this may be just a new person's eyes on this, is I just worry that you could be creating a canyon with a little light with Street A. So just thinking of that with the height waiver and you know, making sure that it is a welcoming space. And I also want to kind of seize on the comment about wanting to make this a walkable neighborhood. And I just want to make sure that, you know, hearing your concerns about the retail space, just making sure that there is enough retail or activation, to Councilmember Spiegel's point, that, you know, it is a walkable neighborhood and it's not just a couple of stores and primarily just a residential, if this is going to be a CD property, not just a residential property. And, you know, noticing things like back-end parking kind of caught my eye as it was mentioned in some of the pieces. I didn't know if that was something that the city did. Like I said, might be a little too minutiae at this stage. And then I think the biggest question that the public may have in hearing that you're going to work with bringing some of the existing tenants back is what happens to Brewster's. And that would be my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to Rob Wu and then Lisa Henderson.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. I'm on the same page as my colleagues about the enthusiasm for this project and what it brings to, as Greg said, kind of the gateway to the city. And I'm gonna be a little more enthusiastic than Ryan is about the concept that Mayor Ashman brought up regarding a pedestrian bridge. And I think we had discussed this as well. And Greg, I appreciate your enthusiasm for the concept as well. But you know, right now, I think it's being raised in a way that the development on this side, the development over across the way in the Spectrum, as well as the 355 BRT, is done in a way that doesn't preclude the project. So we'll have it on our radar so that we're thinking about it. In fact, you know, we received a presentation on 355 BRT among other transportation projects a few weeks ago. My understanding is that the BRT is the highest priority transportation project based on that presentation, and it's a median bus lane in this area. And so the SHA and MDOT are going to need to place a bus stop at somewhere that could be kind of a segue to, or a link point between your side and Spectrum for that bridge that Mayor Ashman was talking about. And I think that would be a great thing to think about, a great thing to have discussions with the other parties so that we don't lose it as future development, future plans come with the confluence of projects in this area. Thanks.
Thanks, Rob. We'll go to Lisa.
Thank you, Mayor. Sorry, I lost my mouse for a second to unmute. Thank you for this plan, and I am excited to see the future possibilities. I spend way too much time in that shopping center today because Brewster's is there. So that is a guilty pleasure that I can't imagine living there and the walkability to Brewster's. That could be a problem. I will echo my colleagues' sentiments in terms of making sure that the walkability and activation are there. There's a reason to walk, that there are retail and stores there that are attractive for folks to walk. And then crossing, and I won't belabor the point, you heard the point of crossing the street to get across 355 of Frederick Avenue to Spectrum, to make sure that that is not so challenging that one, people don't want to do it, or they take a great risk to get it done. But thank you for your presentation, and I'm excited to see the future details.
Thank you, Lisa. We will go to John Bauer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Kimco team. Nice presentation. So the diagram for this plan really makes a lot of sense, at least in 2 dimensions. And I know that there's some issues with topography and how the grade changes is going to be challenging for getting from one end of the site, or it's a triangle, but from along the hypotenuse of the site. However, Travis into Spectrum is a signalized intersection now. You know, there's sort of the bare bones of a potentially really good connection point. I would wholeheartedly support a bridge, but I also, the practical side of me says that that's more years off than doing a better intersection that's signalized, that's already there. And so there's a couple of things going on that I just want to kind of ask you about. The first is the large chunk of green space on the corner, the gateway corner. You know, it looks nice, but when you wall it off from the corner and then you back it to a building that really doesn't have any direct access, it becomes kind of a dead zone. So I wonder what happens if that becomes something that's either an amenity to the residents there or an amenity to the larger community as maybe a park. But then take that a step further, how can that be the point that draws people down to the corner of the site and then makes it the logical way to connect and cross Frederick Avenue over to Spectrum and take advantage of some of the amenities there and vice versa. The diagram right now really puts a lot of emphasis on that mid-block access point, which kind of makes sense given the topography and how you want to carve up the massing of the buildings and access. But I really think and there might be a sketch laying somewhere in somebody's drawer way at the bottom that didn't work, but I really think there's an opportunity to figure out how Travis and Frederick Avenue become a bit more of the nodal component of this project so that you do create a natural connection, an obvious connection, an easy connection, a safe connection, all those things, you know, leverage this idea of perhaps BRT can stop near there, whatever all that starts to mean when you kind of lump it all together. Quite frankly, State Highway has not done a particularly great job with the way the signals are set up now and the lanes are organized. It's a little bit scary to get through that intersection if you're not going with the flow, but there's room for improvement there. And this could be the project in consort with the Spectrum team to do some of that, because, you know, they've also got another building coming on the northwest corner at some point in the future that we've seen a plan for. So it puts a lot of gravity around this intersection that I think maybe you could tap into a bit more.
Okay.
All right. Anyone else want to speak before we go to the public? Not seeing any hands. Okay. This time with Mayor, Council, and Planning Commission. Like to hear from anybody from the public on this topic. I see one hand, Zoom hand raised. Anybody else who'd like to speak, please use the Zoom raise hand function. Tech team, if you could bring up Robert Fisher, please. And Robert, just unmute yourself, state your name, address, or neighborhood, and go right ahead.
Well, good evening, Mayor Cashman. This is Bob Fisher. I'm the owner with Marjorie Lane, my wife, of Brewster's Ice Cream. And can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely. Go right ahead.
Hallelujah. Okay. First and foremost, I want to tell you how much we love Gaithersburg. We have been here for 16 years. It was a challenge getting the place opened, but it is what a great community. And I feel that we've become a major part of that community, being a good neighbor and a good citizen. From the time we opened Brewster's, we had one idea. That was to be absolutely the best ice cream stand in the DMV. We were going to base that on quality. We wanted to make sure that our customers were happy every single time they came. We wanted to give them the best ice cream all the time. Never, ever cut on any of the ingredients. So we've been there for 16 years. We've made the place better for 16 years. We've grown the sales there for 16 years. And we love the fact that we're an institution. I'm now seeing application after application that's pretty much read the same thing. I've been coming to Brewster's for my whole life and I love it. And we love to work with you. And it's been good to see our staff being totally diverse. What a great group of kids we've had that have grown into young adults. They are now doctors, lawyers, teachers, mothers, good people. And so I just wanted to say to Kimco that we're just not one of those other little pieces on the property. And we wish them well, but we certainly hope that they treat us well as in turn. That's it.
Thank you so much, Bob. Do we have any other speakers on this topic? Going once, going twice. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands. Let me just speak to that very quickly and say that I think everybody up here, not speaking for the applicant, they can speak for themselves, but I think everybody up here has a great deal of reverence for Brewster's and is hopeful that no matter what happens here, Brewster's can be part of if there's going to be if this passes and ultimately there's a redevelopment there, that Brewster's would be part of it, because it is a tremendous beloved part of our community. So that is a fact. Greg, maybe I can give you a chance to speak to that if you like. I don't mean to put you on the spot though. It's totally up to you.
No problem. And like I said at the beginning, we have to honor our leases regardless of what. But as I've always said, Kimco is not going anywhere. We said this when we were Kentlands, and I did not even know at that time we'd be considering Gaithersburg to do something. So we're going to be in the community. We tried extensively through this pandemic to work with our existing tenants because we thought it was much better to work with them than end up with a lot of vacancies. So it's no different than we do a redevelopment. We'd love to work around Brewster's and keep them as part of this in the redevelopment or keep them where they are, but we will work with them and all of our tenants that we can to keep them either in their position as we move this project forward. And like I said, this is years away because they have control, Florida Core has control, but we will work with them as we've done in the past with other tenants at Kentlands.
Great, thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? I think we've given the applicant some food for thought here. Jim McNulty, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, this may be a question for you or for staff, just being new to this process. Is there an advantage for rezoning to CD versus an MXD?
That might be for Laura or Greg. It's not a decision that we make. It's a decision that's made between the applicant and staff. Do either of you want to try to address that question? Rob Robinson?
Yes, I'll jump in on this one. There was a lot of discussion, and as the council is aware, MXD works better on larger properties. I mean, this is only 8 acres, so it doesn't meet the standard to begin with, and it has a lot of process associated with it. Whereas CD zone, one of the advantages and why it was developed for this corridor, while it's a floating zone and does have its process, it's relatively clean and easy to move forward with. Again, the process, we have this concept plan and joint public hearing, and a decision could be made whether to do SDP or just go to planning commission. It's not sketch plan, then SDP, then final site plan. So in many ways, for essentially a redevelopment that is 2 buildings, even though there's a lot of facets, as we heard this evening, CD zone is more accommodating to process this in a expeditious manner and a cleaner manner than using MXD.
Great, thank you, Rob.
Thank you both. Any other questions or comments before we go to the records? Okay, I'm going to hand it over to John Bauer. Just remind you, we have 2 different processes here: rezoning and then the concept plan. Go ahead.
Right. All right, very good. Thank you. So I'll start out with Z8911-2021, the zoning map amendment recommendation. Staff recommends the Planning Commission hold their records open until 5 p.m. on Friday, February 18th, 2022. That's 31 days. With anticipated recommendation on March 2nd, 2022. Is there a motion?
moved.
Thank you, Dan. Phil, is that a second?
Yes, it is.
Thank you very much. And I'll do the roll call. Commissioner Wessel,
Aye.
Commissioner Winborn,
Aye.
Commissioner Kaufman,
Aye.
Commissioner Hopkins.
Aye.
No vote aye as well. So that passes unanimously. And the second motion that we're having staff has recommended our action on is for conceptual site plan SP 8910-2021. And for this one, similar to the last one, staff recommends that the Planning Commission hold their records open until 5 p.m. on Friday, February 18th, 2022 for 31 days, with anticipated recommendation on March 2nd, 2022. Is there a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Danny. Commissioner Wessel,
Aye.
Commissioner Winborn,
Aye.
Commissioner Kaufman,
Aye.
and Commissioner Hopkins.
Aye.
No vote aye as well. That passes unanimously. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you very much. Okay, so on the rezoning, staff recommends that we hold our record open until 5 p.m. on Friday, March 11th, with anticipated policy discussion on April 4th. What is the pleasure of the council? Ryan?
So moved.
Okay, Rob Wu.
Second.
Okay, I will call the roll. All in favor say aye, and opposed say nay. Councilmember Harris,
Aye.
Councilmember Henderson,
Aye.
Councilmember McNulty,
Aye.
Councilmember Spiegel,
Aye.
and Councilmember Wu.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. And next, let me just get to the right page here. On the concept site plan, staff recommends that the mayor and council hold a record open until 5 p.m. March 11th with anticipated policy discussion on April 4th. What is the pleasure of the council? Okay, Neil.
So moved.
Okay, Jim McNulty.
Second.
Okay, I'll call the roll. Councilmember Harris,
Aye.
Councilmember McNulty,
Aye.
Councilmember Henderson,
Aye.
Councilmember Spiegel,
Aye.
and Councilmember Wu.
Aye.
All right, carries unanimously. Thank you all very much. Greg and team, appreciate the presentation. We will talk to you all soon.
Thank you.
And and thank you, planning commissioners. You're welcome to stay, of course. We figure you probably won't. Next, we have from the mayor and city council, we are going to start with council member Lisa Henderson.
Thank you, Mayor. I will be brief and just want to take a moment and thank the Parks and Rec team with Warren Dinwiddie and the resident Alexa Huerta, along with Gaithersburg High School students for a successful winter coat drive, and thank them for their work and for their efforts. That was fantastic. And those are my comments.
All right, thank you, Lisa. We will go to Jim McNulty.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had the privilege of joining Boy Scout Troop 926 last night on Martin Luther King Day to help them with their citizenship in the community and communications merit badges. We had a great conversation talking about municipal government, the things that we do and we do not do, and got some great questions from the Scouts and really appreciate it. And then they went on to watch Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech. So it was a great evening, and I appreciated the opportunity to talk to our scouts. I also had the opportunity to attend the financial budget workshop that was put on by Kim Francisco and the team and the staff. Really appreciated the time that they put into that, and thank you for helping get us up to speed on everything budgets. I know that's going to come in very handy very soon. Had the opportunity to attend my first committee meeting with the Council of Governments, Human Services Policy Committee. It was a really interesting conversation. There was a presentation, some research that was done on the history of basically enslaved people in Northern Virginia and the impacts that that has had on policy starting in the 1700s all the way up to modern day. It was really interesting to look at the impacts that it continues to have on equity issues and just the filter that municipalities can put onto an equity approach when it comes to new legislation. So I appreciated the opportunity to listen to that and to learn a little bit more about some of the places that I lived in Northern Virginia and some of the unmarked history that is there and that has been kind of bulldozed over time, which was really saddened me to learn. But it was really quite enlightening. Also hearing from some of the other municipalities and other counties in the area about some of the challenges that they are having being short-staffed in human services areas because of the COVID pandemic. And I think that was all that I wanted to bring up tonight. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Jim. We will go to Neil Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm going to keep it fairly brief as well. First of all, as the council liaison to the Transportation Committee, we've struggled in recent years to get people on it, but we've had an influx of new members. So I'd like to welcome the two new ones who were appointed today, David Belgard and Matthew Amon, as well as Sean Emerson, who joined the committee as of last month. And I know we're looking forward to getting good things done for that committee and for the city. I'd also like to shout out to Carol Berger, who was one of the longest term members of that committee, who has just recently rolled off the committee. She's done tremendous work over the years, in particular for bicycling and for Bike to Work Day. She's always been a big part, and we're going to miss her, but I'm sure we will see her on her bicycle through Old Town and at Bike to Work Day. So thanks to the new members as well as to Carol. Speaking of transportation, there is a Transportation Planning Board meeting this week, and there's a few items that will be discussed that I'll share any interesting details with as we go forward. The presentation of the updated highway safety targets for the region, which is important. Another presentation on connected and automated vehicle principles and the principles that the region is looking for as we move forward, hopefully soon with automated vehicles. The goal being that we want to have automated vehicles available by the time my kids take my car keys away. And an update to the planning process for the updated 25-year plan for transportation for the region. So that's what's going on there. Hope everyone survived the latest snowstorm and managed to do some good for Martin Luther King Day. That's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you, Neil. We'll go to Rob Wu.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll echo Neil on, I hope everyone had a meaningful Martin Luther King Day observance. Just a quick note, I attended the Environmental Affairs Committee's inaugural meeting for 2022, and get ready. It's going to be environmental overdrive this year. They have a very ambitious agenda coming forward. And then lastly, I just wanted to commend Council Member Emeritus Michael Sesma on his achieving the under on 3 minutes. I would have pegged him at over, but he came in actually well under the 3 minutes. So kudos to him.
All right. Thanks, Rob. We'll go to Ryan Spiegel.
Thanks, Mayor. Councilmember Wu, it sure would have been interesting if we had to watch the mayor cut off former council member Sesma at 3 minutes and 1 second. Fortunately, that didn't have to happen. Let me start with a formal announcement. The mayor and city council are seeking to fill a vacancy on the Board of Supervisors of Elections, also known as the BOES, for one alternate member position. The Board of Supervisors of Elections works in conjunction with the city's Department of Legal Services, and the board oversees the registration of voters, petitions for elected office, and officiates over all city elections, regular or special. The board consists of 5 members and 1 alternate who are appointed by the mayor with the approval of the city council, and members serve staggered 4-year terms. Regular elections are held in odd-numbered years on the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November, with the next election set for Tuesday, November 7th, 2023. All applicants must reside within the corporate city limits and be a registered voter in the city. Resumes and letters of interest can be submitted via mail to Mayor and City Council, 31 South Summit Avenue, Gaithersburg, Maryland, 20877, or via email to cityhall@gaithersburgmd.gov. The position will remain open until filled, and for more information, you can visit the city's website or contact City Attorney Lynn Board at 301-258-6310. Again, as others have said, I hope everyone had a meaningful Martin Luther King Day celebration and observance. We usually mark it as a day of service in our community. And I know a number of us had the opportunity to participate in COVID-safe virtual community service activities with our families, which was really nice. Of course, it would be better for all of us to be in person, and hopefully that day will be coming soon. But the county's volunteer center is continuing to organize activities with nonprofit partners over the course of the entire week, making it a Martin Luther King, not day of service, but week of service. So for folks who have the opportunity and the interest, I would encourage you to check out the listing of different ways that you can help participate in community service activities for the rest of this week and throughout the year. You can find that information through the city's social media and through the county's website and social media as well. I want to congratulate all of the committee volunteers in the city who were appointed or reappointed tonight. We had a nice long list, appreciate their participation, and a number of longtime, well-respected volunteers who are retiring or rotating off city volunteer advisory boards. Neil already mentioned Carol Berger on the Transportation Committee. We also have stalwart of the Multicultural Affairs Committee, Ken Weiss, who's decided to step down recently, as well as Barbara Harbison, who's been a great leader on the Community Advisory Committee, as well as I think Joy Thibault from the CAAC, the Cultural Arts Advisory Committee, all of whom have decided to step away from their service. We appreciate your service. It's a well-deserved break or retirement, but maybe some of you will come back out of retirement in the near future to keep serving or find new ways to stay engaged with the city. And we really, really appreciate all your time, energy, and leadership given over the years. In addition to our volunteers, I also want to say a word about one of our dedicated staff members in the city, Tawana Lofton, who recently left her role in the Community Services Division, and we wish her well. At the staff level, we've had an opportunity to wish Tawana well already, but I just wanted to do it publicly, particularly because I've worked closely with her over the years in the development of the Bank on Gaithersburg program and the financial literacy initiatives that the city has grown over the years, and she has just been instrumental in making that such a success. So Tawana, I want to wish you all the best, and please stay in touch with the city. And thank you so much for all you've done, not only for Bank on Gaithersburg, but for many other Community Services Division programs as well. In fact, just in the last couple of days, there's been some new news coverage about how Montgomery County Public Schools are trying to further some proposals to make financial literacy education a requirement in our public high schools. So stay tuned. Hopefully there'll be more good conversation on that, which would be another great step in the direction of financial empowerment. I wanted to just say a couple of words about some other newsworthy events in the last few days. I'm sure we've all followed with bated breath the Texas synagogue hostage situation. Many of us have already commented either on social media or elsewhere about it. Very, very fortunate that all the individuals who were taken hostage were able to get free and be unharmed, and that's wonderful. But this incident is another stark reminder that anti-Semitism and terrorism, frankly, are still real threats in our country and in our communities, and we need to remain vigilant. And I know that our city leadership and our public safety officials working closely with our community continue to do that. Also wanted to note the passing of Montgomery County resident Charles McGee, Brigadier General and one of the last surviving Tuskegee Airmen who passed away a couple of days ago at the ripe old age of 102. I think a number of us have had a chance to hear him speak or see him at community events around the county over the years. It's in a way cosmically fitting, perhaps, that he passed on the same weekend as Martin Luther King Day is observed, as he also was such a trailblazer in helping to desegregate the United States military. Our thoughts and prayers are with his family, but he leaves behind an incredible legacy that will ripple for generations. I wanted to just briefly comment on some of the public comments we received from our friends in the Hidden Creek community. I've had a few conversations over the years with our colleagues and staff about rethinking or supplementing maybe some of the outreach that we do in terms of what the latest best practices are for road maintenance. I know we have pretty good explanations on our website, and I know that our public works staff does a really good job of going out into communities to talk to folks who have questions and meet with people to talk about these road projects. But I'd like us to consider exploring other ways that we can sort of preemptively be educating and doing outreach to the general public about why maybe the sort of old-fashioned idea that every time we do maintenance on a road, we would, mill it and completely repave it isn't really the modern best practice anymore. And why sometimes you're going to have crack sealant or you're going to have micro paving, which may not exactly look and feel the same way as old-fashioned milling and paving does, and what the benefits and trade-offs are to that, so that people are perhaps less caught off guard when projects are done in their community. So maybe that's a conversation we can all continue to have in the coming months with each other and with staff. Don't get me wrong, I think we already do a really strong job of trying to do the outreach, but maybe there's other things we can continue to think about doing so folks have a better understanding of what's coming in their neighborhood and why it's going to look a certain way. And then finally, I know there's been a lot flying around in terms of updates and information about free COVID testing kits from different levels of the government, and the status of all the rules and protocols for social distancing and COVID, and the continued impact of Omicron on our government services. I just want to encourage everybody to please continue to follow our city updates on social media and elsewhere and stay vigilant. We are still in the midst of this, and look for updates on how you can get tested if you need to be tested, and hopefully we'll have the opportunity in the near future to help disseminate free test kits, and reach out to us if you have questions. about that or about what the latest updates are on our rules and procedures at the moment. That's all from me this evening. Thanks for your patience.
Okay, am I muted? I am not muted. Okay. Because I had the little alert on my screen. You are muted, and I'm actually not muted. So thank you, Zoom. I want to, given the late hour, I want to associate myself with all of the comments from my colleagues, which I thought were very, very eloquently delivered. And a special shout out to Ken Weiss and Joy Thibault and Barbara Harbison and Tawana Lofton, and wishing her luck in the future and hoping she stays in touch. And I'm gonna leave it at that for my remarks, but I will note in terms of upcoming meetings that for the next 2 weeks we have work sessions. Next week we'll receive an update from Montgomery Planning on the draft quarter forward plan. It's kind of it's rough to say that unless it's a tongue twister. Quarter forward plan reminds me of 30 Rock, rural juror. It just doesn't roll off the tongue well. And then the following week, so that's January 24th, next Monday, 7:30 p.m. The following Monday, on January 31st, we are going to have a joint work session with the Board of Supervisors of Elections to discuss the election we just had in 2021 and talk about directions forward. The next regular session of the Mayor and City Council will be held on Monday, February 7th, and 7:30 p.m. You can join us and participate in the same way you are now. If you'd like to be on the Zoom at any point, you go to gaithersburgmd.gov/virtual in order to do that. It's my understanding that tonight we need to have a closed executive session, and I would like to put it out to the council if anybody would like to make that motion to have a closed executive session. The packet page is 1357 in case you'd like to find it that way, council members. You'll just have to sort of repurpose it into a motion. Ryan, go ahead.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. I was also unmuting. I move that the Mayor and City Council of Gaithersburg conduct a closed executive session virtually online immediately following this session on Tuesday, January 18th, 2022. The meeting is proposed to be closed pursuant to the general provisions article of the Annotated Code of Maryland, sections 3-305B4, to consider a matter that concerns the proposal for a business or industrial organization to locate, expand, or remain in the state, and 3-305B8 to consult with staff, consultants, or other individuals about pending or potential litigation, with the topic to be discussed being an update on the status of the Fishman project at 315 East Diamond Avenue.
Okay, Neil.
Second.
Okay, I will call the roll. All in favor say aye, and opposed say nay. Councilmember Harris.
Aye.
Councilmember McNulty.
Aye.
Councilmember Henderson.
Aye.
Councilmember Spiegel.
Aye.
And Councilmember Wu.
Aye.
All right, carries unanimously. We will have that executive session immediately upon the adjournment of this meeting. We'll go to from the city manager, Tanisha.
Thank you, Mayor Ashman. Given the hour and the fact that we have additional business this evening, myself, along with Assistant City Manager Tom Lonergan and Deputy City Manager Dennis Enslinger, will forego our reports this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. Very considerate. We will move on to staff guidance then, and turn it over to Lynn Board on opioid litigation settlement.
Thank you, Mayor Ashman. The item that we have before us tonight is I'm seeking authority from you all to enter into what are basically 3 different agreements related to the national opioid litigation. On a nationwide level, we've obtained settlement agreements with 2 groups, one the distributors group and the other Janssen for opioid violations in the past. Those settlement agreements would lead up to $551 million to the state of Maryland. The deadline for entering into those settlement agreements is January 26th. As a result of those agreements, MML, MACO have been working closely with the Maryland Attorney General to discuss how those proceeds would be distributed throughout the state of Maryland. So there is a draft state subdivision agreement also that would deal with the distribution of those funds. For the city of Gaithersburg, we would receive a little over $1,009,000, and that would be distributed in basically two ways. There would be $360,000 that would be distributed directly to the city, and then there would be approximately $650,000 that would be available to the city through grants from the Maryland Department of Health. I do need to caution that these payments are payable over an 18-year period of time, although the payments are kind of front-loaded for the first couple of years of the settlement agreement. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have this evening. And again, I'm seeking authority to enter into these settlement agreements. I also do, before I go to questions, want to thank Councilmember Spiegel, who also sat in on many, many meetings with me, with MML and MACO and the AG's office, trying to develop these agreements.
Thank you so much, Lynn. Any questions, or would someone, if not, would someone like to move to authorize Lynn to enter into the agreements? Ryan Spiegel.
So moved.
Okay. Rob Wu.
I'll second.
Okay, I will call the roll. Councilmember Harris.
Aye.
Councilmember McNulty.
Aye.
Councilmember Henderson.
Aye.
Councilmember Spiegel.
Aye.
And Councilmember Wu.
Aye.
Carries 5-0. Lynn, I know you did a lot of work to get to that moment, and Ryan, appreciate your work too. But Lynn, I know you really put in a lot of time on this. So thank you, and good luck with it, with entering
Thanks,
into
Lynn.
the settlement.
Hey, thank you, and I will forgo my any from staff comments this evening.
Okay, well then, we have come to the end of our agenda. I will remind everyone we have work session each of the next 2 weeks. Next week, receiving a presentation from the county on Corridor Forward. The following week, joint work session with the Board of Supervisors to discuss the previous election and set directions for the next. And then the next regular meeting of the Mayor and Council will be on February 7th. Until next time, let's do great things, Gaithersburg. We are adjourned.